Kia ora, Aotearoa. Welcome to the new series. This is In the Service of Others, Who Dares Wins, and we're back with co-founder Joe Hotai, former Special Forces operator, SAS, and we're going to spend time with him today, talking about his time in the unit, how he's transitioned out of the unit, and a whole lot of different things. So we're really keen to get into this because I'm really interested to hear Joe's perspective on his time in the regiment, and how the things that he's learned and the things that they have probably have impacted him in many, many different ways. So let's see what happens. Let's see how we go. So kia ora, Joe, welcome.
Kia ora, brother. Good to see you, Pete.
Yeah, good to see you too, bro. Hey, let's start off. I know back in our first podcast, you talked about having that burning desire when you were 14 to become, I want to be a Special Forces operator, or I want to be in the SAS, or I want to be in all three of them, all three countries. But when you got to that point, I'm going to just jump straight into it. But when you got into that point where you were able to apply for or go for selection, was it everything you thought it was?
When I got to apply, you mean? Before doing...
when you get to apply, sorry, probably the part where you're actually in it now. You've applied and you're into the start of selection.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
It was without knowing exactly what was going to be involved. I had somewhat of an idea prior to selection, because you hear the stories of people that have gone on to make it, or the opposite to that, you hear the stories of those that have failed, and you hear the different parts that they failed on. So things would jump out at me. It'd be some people that say, a whole bunch of people fail after, without even getting through day one, which is quite physically taxing and all that sort of stuff. Then I'd hear stories of people failed the open navigation phase, which is a period of time. I won't go into all the details, but a period of time where you're conducting these navigation legs, and they were either coming in too slow or under time. Then I'd hear other stories of people that had failed on the dunes phase, or, once you get to the end of the selection or the last day and you're doing the 60 clicker or the 60 kilometre pack march, the final part of it, you're thinking by that stage, you're pretty much, you've completed the selection if you can get to that stage, because then it's just a case of just one foot after the other, so to speak. But so as I sort of pieced all those things together, I'd heard all of that stuff before I went on selection. And even though I didn't know exactly when that would happen or when that would be, I was sort of in my own head ticking off little landmarks. Oh, cool, got through that. Yeah, I'm through that piece. And and just made my way through. So this is just in relation to the New Zealand selection process as well. So we'll probably delve into that a little bit more as we go through. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, was it everything I expected it to be? To be quite honest, it was. And in many respects, I thought it was even better than what I thought, because of the structure, everything, was just, my experience in the interpret was just on point. Like they were expected to be at this place at this time. If you weren't there, you found out about it. And just the DS at the time, so the directing staff, the instructors, were just, I didn't even know them, but I was already had an immense amount of respect for them, just because they've been through this, and what I sort of pictured in my head that they've been a part of and done in the service of others, in the service of the people next to them and their families and their country and the unit as a whole. So yeah, it was everything I thought, plus a little bit more.
Just a little bit more. Yeah. There's a documentary that floats around on YouTube now, but it was made a number of years ago, because the uniforms are a lot older. It's the old
DPM style.
DPM style, yeah. So it talked about selection to the unit, a little bit more above that, beyond that. I forget when it's done, but you find it on YouTube now.
Yeah.
And they talk about they show the selection at the beginning, and there's a group, and they go off on a river run. And even then, and they came back, and even then some people failed that run. So I can only imagine you're hyping yourself up to okay, I'm starting it, and then you don't even get past that first hurdle. So I guess what I'm trying to say with that is you've gone all the way through selection. So what drove you? There must have been something unique about you and about other operators that have gone through selection to get out to the other end, barring injury, because it happens. Right? But what was your driver?
Good question, B. I think it's the same. Actually, no, I won't jump the gun. Everybody's going to be different. For me, putting my young schoolboy hat on, the initial desire and drive was I thought it looked cool. That was my initial thought when I saw the book and I saw the images. I thought, man, that looks cool. I'd love to do that. Once I joined the army and then sort of started understanding more about what was going to be involved in that and the nature of that type of work, that increased my desire to want to get there even more, because for me then it was something that was going to be really purposeful, really meaningful, and in my head was going to be really helpful to not only myself but to people that I would be fortunate enough to come into contact with. So those that may not be in a position to look after themselves or get out of whatever situations they may be in, and governments and defence forces, for whatever reason, are called upon to go and help out. So there was that aspect in terms of a broader picture in my mind. And then as it came down to it, for me at least anyway, on the ground, it then became more about the people that I was there with, the ones that I'd gone through with my brothers, the people that I was fortunate enough to serve alongside. So just clarifying here, in this aspect, so we're talking about, I think, or this piece that I'm describing is from my time in the Australian regiment. So just rewinding and the drive for that, I always wanted to, as you touched on, New Zealand one, and the eventual plan, but it didn't start to become as clear until a situation which happened in NZ, which I'll talk about, where I then really started go, okay, I'm going to do the Australian one, and then a few years later, I said, cool, I want to do the British one now. But the driver was always, I guess it evolved over time. So the driver was, I thought that looked cool, to, there's a purpose behind this and what it could mean in terms of benefiting others that may not be in a position to help themselves or look after themselves. And then to being on the ground was, well, for me anyway, actually, I need to make sure that my brothers are okay, that the people left and right of me and my leaders are good, and that they get back home and that we get back home. So that just sort of evolved for me over that time, in terms of my purpose and drive, and that drive never left. So once I was there and in the thick of it, and even to a degree, or no, not to a degree, to be absolutely honest, during selection and cycle as well, that became more clear too. So it wasn't necessarily that once I was on operations, then I felt the bond to my brothers even stronger. That happened before we even stepped foot on the operational battlefield, so to speak. So I was already wired that way in terms of everything that was happening and what I was feeling and what I was going through, to the point that, when it comes time that we deploy on operations, then I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that the boys are safe, because I know they're going to be doing the same for me. So the drive was very, it evolved and was deep and meaningful for me anyway. Still is today. Yeah. Beautiful.
I like that. That actually paints a very human side to this, because I guess what we see in the media is a snapshot of a video that's 1 hour long or 3 minutes long. There's other videos about NZSAS or the SASR or what have you on YouTube. There's a reality show on at the moment here in Australia called SAS Australia, where they put through celebrities through different activities. Which is really interesting. But painting that human side, I want to go again, just hone a bit more on the selection part of it. You talk about that camaraderie, you talk about that purpose and that drive, but when you're all by yourself, doing the 60 clicker, or you're doing that run all by yourself, or what have you, and I want to jump into that 60 clicker because I only seen this on the video, and I've heard some other people talk about it, but you get halfway or what have you, and you're sleep deprived or whatever. How does your brain work? How do you keep going? What is driving you there?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, it was really simple. Like I felt, well, I was in my mind. It was really clear. It was clear. I knew this was just me, my thoughts and feelings. I knew once I got to that stage, I was going to finish. I was going to finish the selection, and nothing was going to, unless I got run over by a car or some wild animal coming up. You don't have any that's going to, attack me and rip me up or anything like that. I was completing. I was finishing. Whether I was crawling by the time I got across the finish line, or whether I was, trying to find some way to slide myself or drag myself across the ground, I was gonna finish. So in my head, I had already made it, if that makes sense. Made it in the sense of I've already completed selection. It didn't matter at that stage. Nothing, everything else leading up to that point. If all the other activities leading up to that point hadn't stopped me by that stage, my mindset was nothing was going to stop me by the time I got to there. So that was quite easy for me to drag myself through. Physically, it's definitely tough. My feet were pretty wrecked, as everybody's usually are. They were swollen up pretty badly by the time I got to the end, and that's partly due to me not really managing myself as well as what I could have. So I was young and naive, and only 20 years of age as well at the time, and didn't understand fully. Like, I could have managed that heaps better. My feet would have come out in pretty good nick, I think, like in hindsight, and having that benefit of hindsight. But what I did was I just tabbed and walked until I needed to stop, and just kept going, trying to finish it as quick as I could, without realizing that all that time and hours on my feet and walking, sometimes hard road, sometimes gravel road, and all the different bits and pieces that go along with it. All I needed to do was walk consistently for periods of time, stop and have a rest, get my feet up, and that would have negated a lot of the swelling that happened in my feet. And as I think back about it, and as I thought about it after, but I didn't. I was young and dumb and just and I remember on that day. Now, I don't know if it was intentional, but it seemed to me that we left, it was slowest to quickest. So whoever came in last over the phase of what happened leading up to that, the next day, from my recollection, this is on the New Zealand one, they left first. And there was about a 2 to 5 minute gap, something like that, between each person. And I left third to last. And because I knew I had been doing okay in terms of my times and getting to the landmarks that I needed to get to. And then I left third to last, and I was flying. I felt like I was hammering, and I was at the front for ages, and I was thinking, I'd look back and I couldn't see anybody. I was like, this is awesome. And then carry on. There'd be water stops along the way, so the directing staff, there'd be vehicles, and there'd be some jerry cans and stuff where we could top up with water, and carrying on. And then I got passed by I think it was John McNutt. Sadly, he was an officer. He's passed away. He died. I think it was he was in the States at the time, from memory. And really good man. I thought he was a really good man. I didn't get to spend as much time with him as I would have liked, but fit, strong. I'm pretty sure he left last that day, so I left third to last. I was in front for ages, so he must have been running or something, but he stopped me down, no sweat, and then he was gone, and then I couldn't see him. I didn't see him then. And then there was another good friend of mine. He's not serving anymore. I don't know if I'll mention his name here, but he ended up overtaking me. He's somebody that I'd love to have on this particular series. He finished second. I think I ended up finishing third. Yeah, I did end up finishing third. So left third to last, finished third. John McNutt was first, and then the other guy was second. Then myself dragged myself in later. But I could have just managed myself better, and I didn't. But again, lessons learned from that. So to hopefully that answers your question. I was in a good frame of mind, I was, right through even to the end. The only thing that really hurt was just my feet. My feet were really painful. They were swollen. Even once I stopped to sit down and have them flat and then try to elevate them, the pain was just really, really sharp, and something that I hadn't felt before, and it was constant. So lesson learned from there. I could have powered along, stopped, but I didn't. I just powered along for as long as I could, stopped, carried on. I don't know how many times I stopped, but it got to the stage where my feet hurt that bad that if I sat down to put my feet up, it was a real struggle to get myself back to my feet. So I would stay on my feet and just hunch myself over and just lean forward and rest my pack on my back and stay on my feet, because the pain of having to get up off the ground was just that intense that that probably would have been difficult for me to get up. I would have got up, or I would have dragged and crawled, but I didn't want to go through that. So I just stayed on my feet and rest there for moments at a time, and then carry on walking again.
Do you find did you find that when you got past twice, because you were in front for ages, right? Did that ever mess with your mind? No,
it actually peed me off.
I was thinking you were going to say that.
Because I was so far in front, literally there were some massive long straights, and I would turn back and couldn't see anybody, and I was like, man, I'm gonna smash this, I'm coming. It didn't happen. But John McNutt, for me, I don't know what he was like as a leader, as an officer in the unit once he was badged and serving, because I never had that privilege to serve with him in the New Zealand unit. But from all accounts, and from what I've heard, and from my short time experience with him on cycle, on selection and then on cycle, he is a bloody good man. So that was really sad to read and hear in the news that he had passed, and it was just the I won't go into the detail of it, but it's on the news in terms of what happened. It was an accident on a training exercise, and the ordnance got dropped in the wrong place, from what I understand, and sadly he was one of those that passed away over there at that time. But to come back to your question, it annoyed the hell out of me.
There seems to be again, and this is just on what you see on the media, there seems to be that degree of competitiveness, not only with I guess to some extent with others, but it's that competitiveness within yourself to keep going. And I can imagine you're way out in front, and knowing you, Joe, you're just like, okay, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to smash this, and then somebody overtakes you. What the? And you try and get there. But I guess you would have swung there around. But it sounds like to me, right? And please correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you're all good up here. You just said that. So I guess to get all good up here in your mind to be able to complete something as arduous as selection would mean that you were prepared physically to do that. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, 100% be like. And that's another really good point. So as much as you don't need to be the fittest or the strongest in terms of a physical sense with regards to being a member of a unit like that, or even doing selection and going through cycle and then operating, it helps. It certainly helps. It's not the most important part. The most important part I found, which I realized later, was the mindset to want to be there in the first place. And that's been, in my experience anyway, that's been the only real definitive distinction between those that make it and those that don't. Now, to your point though, the physical aspect 100% shouldn't be neglected and go, I'm all good up here, so I'm just going to eat pies and donuts and cakes and ice cream, soft drink, because you'll end up feeling like those pies and cakes and ice creams and fizzy drinks as you're trying to to breathe. So I knew, again, and I got tips from people that had been on selection that had come back and then, didn't get through, and then they went back again. And one of the things that stuck out for me, really good friend of mine, I'm going to mention his name here. He's out of the unit now, but I'll mention his name because it really stuck out to me. I don't remember the exact location that we were in, but I remember he was talking about his time on selection. He had gone on selection, didn't get through the first one, got sent back to the unit or whatever his situation was. But he said something that stuck out in my head, and I connected with it straight away. He said that his legs were weak. He said, my legs were weak. Aaron Pohatu, good man, he's still here in NZ, but he said his legs were weak, and they just weren't strong enough. Mentally, he was good, but his legs weren't strong enough to get him up and down the hills and to cover the distance and the required time and that sort of thing. And I thought, man, what are my legs like? Straight are my legs lift strong enough? And I was thinking, I'm not too sure. So anyway, once I received again that little nugget, just these little snippets of information that I was picking up before I was able to put in my application, my approach to that was I grabbed a mortar box. The mortar platoons have them in the battalion that I was at the time. They have the ordnance and stuff in there, but you collect them after exercises and whatever like that because they're handy for storing whatever in your room and that sort of stuff. So I had these mortar boxes and I would sit it in the corridor outside my room. Television, when I used to have television, would be on, or music. I had a stereo, play some music, and I would load my pack up with heaps of weight and just be in the corridor with all my gear on and then just step up and down, step up. Wow. Every night. That was one tool that I used. Quite a bit of running that I would do. I was never a great runner, still not a great runner, but a lot of endurance-y type stuff, and then putting the pack back on, increasing the weight, and just step-ups after step-ups. And that was my never-ending hill.
Never-ending hill.
Yeah, so I never won against that hill. I never made it to the top because it was always there. So get up and get down, get up and get down. And that really helped me, at least in my experience. My legs felt really good. So knowing that physically I felt that I was okay. I could have done more to prepare myself physically. But I didn't really know. I didn't have a training program. I didn't ask anybody for a training program. When I heard that piece of information, made me think about what are my legs like. I knew I could run the required distance for the basic testing requirements of what would be expected as the minimum. I knew I could do the push-ups. I knew I could do the sit-ups and all that sort of stuff of what was required and expected. But I didn't know how my legs would fare over the duration of the selection and the demands that would be placed on them. So, yeah, that was one aspect. If anything, I just hammered the step-ups or the heavy to try to get myself as prepared as I could. And that was probably, aside from the other minimum fitness requirements of it, that was probably where I spent the majority of my time. Yeah.
Wow. That's a nice way you phrase it, the never-ending hill. It's almost like not only was it you building your legs, but you're building your mind as well. Whatever's coming, I'm just gonna smash it. So I just wanted to swing a little bit with this because you went through selection. So how many times did you go to selection with in New Zealand SAS?
Once.
Just once?
So I went through it and was successful on my first attempt, which was great. Yeah.
Oh, can't wait. All right, so then I just want to swing to, then you go into Australia. I'll come back to NZ in a little bit, but then you go to Australia and you go out for selection to SASR. Now, how many times did you go through selection there? Was it just the one?
Yeah.
One more time.
Successful in the first attempt as well, which was another bonus. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, there you go. So comparing the two, and maybe you're not comparing apples with apples, but how did you find the second time with SASR?
Yeah, awesome question. I got asked this question by the panel. I forget what day of the Australian selection it was on, but there was an officer, a couple of a sergeant, and maybe a staff sergeant and a corporal. So there's a bit of a panel sitting in front, and I got asked that question directly because they knew that I had come from NZ, that I'd completed the NZ selection and cycle, and I don't know how much they knew up until that point of the reasons why I wasn't able to serve operationally or go to a designated squadron in the New Zealand group. We'll probably come back to that at some stage. But he asked me, he goes, so his question was similar to yours, but probably more direct and blunt. And so his question was, so candidate 19, so that was my number on the Australian selection. Which selection is harder, the New Zealand one or this one? And I was sitting there. We got to come in and sit down. I was late at night, and I thought, man, that is one heck of a loaded question. And I thought, this is do or die for me right now if I answer this question.
He's on the chopping block.
Yeah. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to be honest. And so I was, and my reply went sort of along these lines. I said, to be honest, staff, so we still needed to call everybody staff. I said, I found the New Zealand selection a lot harder. And you could see the body language, and I just felt the whatever it was in the air in that room, just like getting their back up, sort of like, who the heck does this guy think he is? And that's what it felt like. That's probably completely wrong, but that's what was going through my mind. And I could even feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, thinking they are not happy with this answer. Anyway, to be honest, I found the New Zealand one harder. And before, or probably almost simultaneously, as he said, so why is that? I was then going into further explaining the reasons why. And then I delved in and said, well, the reason that I say that is because when I did the New Zealand selection, I was young. I was a lot younger. I was inexperienced, not only in life, but in soldiering in general. I didn't know, and I had no sort of training program to help, prepare me physically for that selection. And so by the time I finished the New Zealand selection, I was pretty well beaten up and broken. Like, my body was really broken down. Like, mentally I was good, but I got to the end, and just knowing that it was finished and getting the handshake at the end, early hours in the morning, by the staff there that's congratulating you, saying well done for completing. And it's not a big celebration. It's like, well done, you've completed. It's like, get on the back of the truck now. I was like, it was just this release of, I didn't need to be on edge anymore. I had completed that. And then that's when I felt all the pain and just amplified even more. And that stayed with me for weeks after selection, not days, but weeks for me anyway.
Wow.
And so, and just to put that into context, I went on selection, the New Zealand one, no, not 98, just over 100, 98, 110, sorry, 110 kilos I went on, just under. And I came off selection, off the New Zealand one anyway, 78 kilos. So, I lost a massive amount. You don't get fed a heck of a lot on selection. And, and my body was eating whatever it could to maintain itself. So if you want a rapid weight loss program,
go selection.
But, and that was over probably a 15-day period. So there's the pre-selection and then the number of days pre-selection and then the actual selection. So anyway, that aside, short period of time to lose that amount of weight, but you're clocking up distance and kilometers and all that sort of stuff and not getting a lot to eat. So I mentioned, I didn't go into all that detail, but I described in a nutshell where I was coming from. Young, inexperienced, lack of training and understanding, but I had a genuine desire to want to be there. Then I said, so coming here to the Australian one and being on the Australian selection, I feel like, and I remember saying this, I said, I feel like I have an advantage over those that are on the selection. And I said, I don't know how many are here for the first time or if it's their second time or whatever, but I feel like I have an advantage because I've gone through that process, albeit different. I have a better understanding of what to expect on selection. I have a better awareness of my body and how and where I can probably pace myself better than just throwing myself 100% into things, and just an overall better appreciation of what's going to be involved, and that it's a long process, and that it's I'm better able to manage myself in the middle of those things. And so I said I feel like I'm way better prepared for this selection. And I said, and at this stage, because the selection wasn't finished, I think, in all honesty, I think we might have only been day 3 or 4 in selection, and we had these little panel interviews. And so I had no idea. That was the other thing. With the Australian one, I was uncertain in terms of the duration of the selection. I knew it was longer than the one I had done in NZ, but by this stage I clarified for them as well and said, and as far as I'm aware, I'm still only early days in this selection, so right at the moment, my time on the New Zealand one, I found a lot harder than where I'm at this stage on the Australian one. And once I had gotten all of that out, again, I felt the mood or the environment change, and the same gentleman, the officer, captain at the time, that asked me the question, his reply was simple, bit of a smirk on his face, and he said, "Good answer." And then, and then I was expecting to just be beasted at the election. You know what? With all due respect and appreciation to SASR and what they did, they didn't. I wasn't targeted or singled out. Oh, actually, maybe one experience which I'll share now, if that's all right, B. There was only one time where I felt the pressure, so to speak, of the Australian selection. And that was, we had finished some open country navigation stuff at one area in Perth there, and then we were getting on the trucks to head to another part of there in Western Australia. So if I'm recalling correctly, we had done some navigational stuff in a place called Lancelin, and then we were travelling from Lancelin to a place called Collie. And so I had time then, I was then tasked after the Lancelin phase of the selection that I needed to learn the Australian national anthem. I was asked first if I knew it. And candidate 19, come on over here. And I got called over, went over. His staff, he was together, standing up as straight as I could. Do you know the Australian national anthem? I was like, oh. I said, no, staff. He goes, wow, have I got something for you? Piece of paper. And it had both verses. So that, I'm not sure if you're aware, I think usually, well, you would be, in the Australian national anthem at sporting events, it's usually just the first verse that they sing. Well, he handed me the piece of paper that had both. And he said, you need to learn this, and you're going to sing it for us when we get to Collie. So the distance and time, that time I was wanting to try to use this to rest and sleep. And a large part of those that were on selection were able to use that time because they weren't tasked with having to learn this, the national anthem. They already knew it, more than likely. Yeah. But I had a really good friend, a number of good friends, but this guy I remember in particular stayed up. He may not remember, but he helped me, at least my recollection, for, if not most of it, then the whole way there. But Tim Allen is his name, and he helped me, or he's holding it and then quizzing me, and then I'd have to, try and sing it again and go, no, you got that wrong, because what I was told is that if I got any word wrong, then everybody was going to be punished. So I was like, oh. So it was, I didn't sleep when I was on the vehicle, on the bus. Pretty sure we're on the bus, or maybe it was a Unimog. No, I'm pretty sure it's a bus that we travelled down on to Collie. So I'm trying to get this right, trying to get the tune of the song of the national anthem in my head. Anyway, I got to the end and did it. Long story short, I got called out. Everybody was lined up, and then the directing staff that had assigned me to do that said that I was now going to sing the Australian national anthem, and I had to sing it out as loud as I could. So I belted it out. I would have been flat as tired, and I felt I got the whole thing right. And those that heard it, from what I understand, and the boys that come up and tell me, oh, good work, because it meant that they didn't have to get punished. So he said, even if I got one word wrong, Everybody was going to get a punishment. Nobody got punished, which was awesome. But the directing staff that assigned that to me, he came up to me later and he said to me, you did get a word wrong, eh? And I didn't know that I got a word wrong. I said, oh, no, staff? And he goes, yeah, you did. And he just left it at that and walked away. And I was thinking, whatever. But then I thought at the same time, maybe I did, and maybe he just didn't punish everybody because I must have done such an outstanding job. But yeah, that was the only little extra piece, for want of a term, that in my experience that the Aussies put on me anyway. But yeah, hard case.
Oh, hilarious! That is hard case. Oh man! Hey, let's swing back. Let's swing back to New Zealand, and probably we might flip between Australia and New Zealand on this one. Yep. But probably getting a little bit more specific in terms of cycle. So you've gone through selection. You got the handshake. Then you now have to pack on another 30 kgs back onto your body and get your feet all good. So you get yourself right. So you go on cycle. So what is that all about?
Cool. So the cycle is where you'll undergo a whole bunch of different training courses that you're required to be able to do or undertake or complete or conduct. From an operational perspective. So done within the reasonably safe confines of a training environment. You've got safety elements and stuff and safety staff that are directing things and very specific in terms of around how things are to be done, and the training that's compacted and compressed into a relatively short period of time in order to equip you and enable you to perform those tasks or those jobs, whatever that might be. Whether that's jumping out of an aeroplane, whether that's rigging up explosives for demolitions to take out specific objects or targets, whether that's utilising different weaponry for the tasks that you may be involved in, whether that's from small arms, a pistol, whether that's sniper rifles, whether that's larger heavy machinery or heavy machine guns, whether it's more tactically in terms of fieldcraft and bushcraft, being out in the jungle, whether that's around counter-terrorism aspects and everything that's involved and encompassed with that. There's a massive amount of stuff that goes into that, whether that's resistance to interrogation techniques, being in combat survival mode and having very limited resources and being expected to still survive and get from place to place to place and meet the requirements. All of that stuff is compressed and jam-packed course after course after course over the period of several months. So whether that's 9 to 12 months of the year, you are back to back in the training that's been provided. And it's awesome. Like, again, it's an incredible time. The learning curve for me was steep as because I'm pretty sure I was the youngest on the NZ1, not only youngest in terms of age, but youngest in terms of life experience and experience in the army in general.
So you were 20?
Yeah.
2020, yeah.
And then, which from what I understood or what I found out later was quite young. So the reason that I found out about that, and sorry, just backtracking a little bit here from Cycle, when I applied to do selection as a member in the 1st Battalion Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment based in Palmerston North, it almost wasn't going to go ahead because the officer commanding at that time for my company that I was in wasn't prepared to I guess, approve it or think, because I was so young. And it wasn't, at that time, from what I understand, it wasn't that normal to get soldiers at a relatively young age like I was to go through selection until they had done at least 3. The common feedback that I seemed to be getting at that time was, you want to get at least 3 to 5 years under your belt, preferably 5 years under your belt. You have more soldiering experience by then, you have more life experience, you're a bit more mature, just all round. And but I didn't want to wait. That wasn't my job. And I wanted to go and do it now, and I wanted to be in that place now, and I wanted to do something that I believed and felt was going to be more purposeful. Not that being an infantryman wasn't purposeful. I wanted something more, just for me personally. And I wanted to feel of what those connections would be like, because again, those snippets that I'd heard, the camaraderie, the brotherhood that you'll make in that unit is different. And so I wanted to I wanted to be in that as soon as I could. So that all of that stuff, it almost didn't come to pass because of that. Eventually, long story short, it did get approved and I was able to go, and I was really grateful. And so now coming back to your piece around the cycle and what that involves, now I'm in the midst of it, and this is even more challenging than selection, I'm finding, for me anyway, because I looked at it as a one and done. Like if I fail something, then I'm getting RTU'd or returned to unit. I'm getting sent back and potentially not even allowed to come back again. So as a young person, you know, those years of experience, had I chosen to stay in battalion and apply a little bit later on, could have potentially come in handy. But again, I think my youth also played a part in me being able to overcome that, because I was so eager and keen and willing to learn, and willing to ask the questions, because I knew that I was young, not only age-wise, but young from a military serving perspective. I could be the dummy on the cycle, you know, and on the courses, and get the extra attention, like by asking the questions to get clarification around stuff. Did I do that all the time or as often as I should have? No, I didn't, because I was still mindful of not wanting to come across like an idiot. So I still had that fear in me to, man, if I ask this question, I'm going to look dumb as. I'm not going to ask this question. So I would wait at times and then go ask one of the boys, hey man, what do I do here? What does this mean? And they were awesome. Every single one of them helped me out, no end, and they were just, you know, they were there for me. And so really grateful for them. So I guess hopefully that helps answer your question. I might have diverged a little bit further. And
that's so good.
That's what cycle was about. And then you want to get to the end of that, knowing that you've successfully completed all those elements. And if you've done all of that well, then you get, I guess, the second handshake, which is you receive your beret and you become an operator within the unit, which this might be one of your questions, but that piece there was where I didn't get to transition to a live operational squadron, at least not in the New Zealand SAS anyway.
Would do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I need to rewind and backtrack a bit.
Sure, that's fine.
And getting onto there. So, selection was done. That was great. I was fortunate to be told that I would progress onto the cycle, which was awesome. Oh yeah, sorry, just on that. Sorry, sidetrack again. This little side note, because I guess the purpose of this series is to not only draw out some of these experiences and memories that happen, but also try to in some way relate them to how they could hopefully be of benefit in the world today, regardless of people's circumstances, and whether that's from a business perspective, relationships, you know, self-employment, or you're employed by an organization or whatever, and try to share things there. So but this memory stands out distinctly. On the New Zealand cycle, day one, I was late. Well, I wasn't late. I got there in time. But everybody was already lined up out the front of the compound of where we needed to parade and be. And I rock up. My mum's brought me there. So I went and stayed with my mum. I was like, oh, yeah, be right. Yeah, it's good. Like, we'll get there. And I'm pretty sure it's still a good 15, 20 minutes early. But everybody was already dressed in their uniform, standing at ease in the ranks there. This was my group, the cycle that I was supposed to be a part of. And I don't know if they were wondering where I was or what, but I got there dead last. Mum pulls up in the car. I rush out, jump in the ranks, and there's already the DS standing there. Like, and then I've got to go and report, and I don't remember what happened, but I just remember feeling embarrassed. This guy's rocked up and his mum's dropped him off. And to make it worse, she had to wait because I hadn't been assigned a room yet in the barracks. So my stuff was in the car. And I was like, oh, Mum, can you just wait here? And she's like, but my mum had work. She had work that she needed to get to. Anyway, long story short, I'm standing there embarrassed. I'm just looking at the face of the staff, and they just look unimpressed, like just... not very happy, unimpressed. The boys, I think, were probably trying to hold in their laughter. And again, this is just that naivety of this young kid getting up here, technically an adult, but here's my mum in the car waiting. Anyway, we go in there, and it was a long process. We were there for hours, and I was like, there was a moment there where I just had to ask the staff, can I please go see my mum, because I need to get my stuff out because she needs to go to work. And they were just unimpressed. Again, the staff that I asked said, basically, go. I went out there, my mum was fuming. She was angry as, I'm so sorry, mum, grabbed my stuff, basically just piled it out of the car, and she left. And so that was not a good start for my selection of day one. And I'm just thinking, man, I'm under the pump now. The spotlight is well and truly on me. This is exactly, and all these things went through my head. This is exactly why we don't have young people like you come in on selection and cycle, because then you do stuff like this. You rock up with your mum, you make her wait for hours, you go out and do this, and then you ask to go out and, because your mum's waiting. I was like, man, I need to pull my finger out, and I need to, start switching on as soon as I can. But anyway, got past the day one of cycle. We start progressing through, and I guess coming to that point, and this is where I'll try to connect why I unfortunately was unable to move into an operational squadron. Was that there was one of the boys' birthday parties, and I'm not going to mention the names and stuff here, but his birthday party was at his family member's home. There was a band from memory that was playing there, and some other civilians and stuff that were there as well. And we trying to fast forward. We weren't going into the family member's home to use the bathroom, so we were down the driveway, basically against the fence. Where males were going to do our business rather than traipsing in and out of the home. And so I went down. There was already a guy there. This was a civilian guy. I'd met him earlier in the night, and I won't mention his name here either, but I'd met him earlier in the night. It was good meeting all these other civilians, but they were friends of my mate who I was on cycle with. So we were on cycle together. He was celebrating his birthday, and he had some other friends and family and stuff there. Anyway, he was arguing and yelling, swearing his head off at some guy that was heading off, walking away. And this was early hours in the morning, maybe 1 o'clock-ish, something like that. Lights from the neighbours and that were starting to come on. And I thought, I'll just tell, hey, don't worry about him, bro, he's gone. Say, he's gone, man, don't worry about it. I had had a bit to drink this evening as well. And he said, F off, go away, telling me to go away. And I was just sort of didn't think too much of it. I said, hey, man, don't worry about it, bro. Just come on back in. And I just sort of put my arm around him because I'd met him earlier. It's like, come on, let's head on back up. He whacked my arm off and then pushed me, shoved me, and then I went flying back a little bit against the fence. The fence sort of caught my fall. And then that still didn't really faze me too much. I just thought, because I still had a bit to drink, and I didn't really, it was just like a push. There was nothing really bad about it, and I didn't go flying back ages. It was just a short distance. Anyway, I foolishly, I guess maybe foolishly in hindsight, went up again and said, hey, bro, just don't worry about it, man. Let's just come back up, and went to guide him back up. And I don't know what they had been arguing about, but he must have been that upset. He just clocked me right in the face, and I got really angry. Long story short, I got angry, and we got into an altercation, and he come off second best, and he ended up definitely not my proudest moment, but I had to be pulled off him a couple of times because I just instantly got really, really angry. He ended up going to hospital with his injuries, and I didn't realise what the injuries were until later. Police and everything came. I was gobbing off to the police. All my crew or my team that I was on cycle with, those that were there, were gathered around me. They pulled me off him. He was stumbling away. He came back again, so I went out to meet him again. Then I had to get pulled off him again. I was answering back to the police when they came, and the guys were trying to just drag me away, telling me to be quiet. eventually at that stage, the police didn't cuff me or take me away, because I guess they didn't know the full situation, and they probably just thought it was just this young, drunk, dumb kid getting cheeky. So anyway, I got taken back to the barracks by the boys. I was worked up and upset. Got back to the barracks. I must have gone off to sleep for a while. There was blood and stuff on my clothing that I had in the barracks. And then I get a knock on the door. Must have been, I don't know, 6 o'clock or something in the morning, 6:30. I open the door and it's the police there in the barracks. And they've come to take me in for questioning. They bag up the clothes that had the blood and stuff on it, because I just dropped them on the floor in my room. Anyway, I got taken into the station for questioning. And I didn't think anything of it. Like, I just thought, tell the truth of what happened, of what I recall happening, and, you know, whatever happens is going to happen. But I didn't expect that I would be looking at potentially my career being ended and looking at 6 years in jail. So fast forwarding, long story short, I got charged with wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm by the police. And that, at the time, from what I was told anyway, came with a 6-year sentence. And that, like, in an instant, once they had outlined those details to me, so bear in mind, I've already given my statement, so they probably would have gone through the relevant protocols. Do I want a lawyer or whatever? And I know I would have just said no, because I just, and my thinking was, I've never been in that situation before. My thinking is just tell the truth of what happened, of what I recall, and I will probably get in trouble, but I didn't expect that level of trouble, if you know what I mean. So anyway, that's what happened. I gave a video recording, blah, 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 and just answered the questions. Basically just said the same thing as what I've just mentioned now. They showed me photos of the guy that I'd had the altercation with. They asked me if I recognised him. I didn't recognise him. So his injuries were pretty bad. So he had, I'd fractured his skull and his jaw and broken his nose. His face was swollen by the time they'd taken the photos and stuff. And when I looked at that, they had taken a photo of me as well. So that punch that he clocked me with, a beauty, a good one, all I had to show for it was a black eye and quite a bit of swelling on the side, but that was it. And so in that moment, it really put into context how much control I lost, or self-control I lost of myself in that moment. And I was really filthy with my, really dirty on myself for that having happened. Because in comparison, and having, I guess, some time to reflect and sober up, for want of a better term, a little bit, it wasn't what I had received when I looked at the photos. So they showed me my photo, and they had his photo there next to them side by side. It didn't warrant what I had done, so I felt really, really bad about what had happened, and still feel bad about it today that has happened. And so going through that process, I then got pulled in, and I'm fast forwarding now, like all that stuff. There was going to be a court case happening, all that sort of thing. I wasn't arrested at that time. I'd given the statements and released. It was a long process. So the court hearings, there was 2 or 3 court cases that took place. But leading up to that, so I was still, this happened in around about May, so pretty early in the cycle of that year of 99. And so I was still on the cycle. I was told, obviously, I was told off by the training warrant officer and those sorts of people and stuff at the time, and they weren't impressed or happy with what I'd done. But I was told that, all going well, and I don't remember exactly what stage, so it might have been after the first court hearing, that if everything went well, and that if I didn't go to jail for what had happened, that I would stay, but I'd be under the microscope. I'd be on a massive probation, but I'd still go to a squadron if I completed everything else. So the cycle's not guaranteed. Just because you're on it, it's not guaranteed that you're going to pass everything. So I still needed to go through all the courses that were still left to be done. I still needed to pass everything, and I needed to pass everything well to warrant getting to the end to receive my wing dagger beret. And so that gave a degree of comfort, but it also added more pressure and stress, because I've added stress and pressure on myself by getting into this altercation. The court hearing isn't finalised, and I'm looking at going to jail while still trying to concentrate and do as well as I can on the courses on cycle to prove that, hey, I can not only do this job, but I do really want to be here and I do really want to serve. And so anyway, fast forwarding all of that, we got to the last court hearing. Prior to that, the lawyer that came in that I had a meeting with, I basically got bailed up and said, what did you do that for? What did you give a statement for? Basically made to feel quite stupid, which I guess is fair enough, because what I did was really stupid. But made to feel really stupid in and around something that I had no idea about the legal system or process. I didn't know that you should wait and that you should never give a statement. You should never give a statement, because he made it very clear, even if you haven't done anything wrong, without having a lawyer or some sort of representation present. I never knew any of that. So I thought, tell them the truth and then, suffer whatever the consequences are. I didn't expect them to be that drastic. Anyway, he well and truly drummed that home. And then we went to court, the final court hearing, and the guy that I had put in, that ended up in hospital, he was at that final court hearing. And I knew that this was the final court hearing. I was going to find out on this day whether I'm going to jail or whether I am somehow miraculously able to get either a reduced sentence or just a fine or something else. And so I saw him rock up. And I thought, he's just here to make sure that I go away. And my support from the unit training warrant officer was there. He was a really good support, a good man. And the conversations that I had with him leading up to that, he really helped me stay on track. He really helped me a lot in terms of the mental space of where I was at. And I hope to have him on this podcast. But in there, the lawyer basically presented everything that he could. And the judge said, well, I still need special circumstances to not send this person to jail. So I'm standing in the dock. I hadn't had any other, military record was good and clean and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, the judge said what he said. Then my lawyer then responded and said, well, I know that the victim that was involved in the altercation is here in the court today. I don't know if he has anything that he'd like to say, but he's here in the court. And I was sitting there thinking, man, that's really random. Like, why would you invite the guy that I put in hospital to say something? Like, all he's going to do is just go, yeah, send that guy to jail. That's what I was thinking. Anyway, he stood up. He stood up in court and he said, and I just looked over at him and he said, yeah, I'm the victim, I guess you could say, Your Honour, addressing the judge. And he goes, I came here today to see justice done. And I thought, yep, I was right. And I'm thinking to myself, lawyer, why the hell did you, mention that? And he goes, I come here today to see justice done. And then he said, but I didn't come here, I didn't expect it. And I don't expect this person to lose his career over a fight that a couple of guys had after having a little bit too much to drink. And man, I was blown away. I was shocked by the words that he had shared, that he didn't expect and that he didn't want to see me. He then further went on to explain and said, I don't want to see him lose his career over what's happened. And then he said, we were both at fault. He said, we both had probably a little bit too much to drink. He said, yeah, I shouldn't have punched him in the head. And he said, yeah, he shouldn't have lost it the way that he did. But, it was a couple of guys that had a bit too much to drink, got into a fight, and I came off second best. And he said, I don't want to see him lose his career over it. And, yeah, man, that blew me away. I don't know if I started shedding any tears while I was in the dock in that moment, but I know I definitely shed some after, when I came out and I had an opportunity to just thank him and hug him after. So while I'm standing in there, he said all of this. I'm blown away. The judge then asks him, just a couple of basic questions. Says, so have you fully recovered from your injuries? And he hadn't. So this was a number of months later, but he said yes. The judge then asked him, "Are you back at work?" And from what I understand, he wasn't back at work, but he said yes. He's worked with his hands, mechanic and stuff by trade. So he was, in those moments, I guess, thinking quickly on his feet, because I don't know if he was expected to be asked those questions. But yeah, trying to frame it in an even more positive or more favourable light for me anyway, in that regard. That's how I interpreted it. And then the judge said, okay. So he said, well, okay, based on that, and based on what the term was used, victim, based on the victim being here today and sharing his comments and thoughts, what we'll do is, and so I got a 12-month suspended sentence. So he issued me with a 12-month suspended sentence, meaning that if I got in trouble for anything else, that charge plus this current charge that I've been charged with would come into effect. I'd go to jail for that time, for that charge that I was currently on, plus any additional time for whatever, wrongdoings I might have done. So that 12 months suspended sentence was coming into play, and then I got a $1,000 or $2,000 fine to pay, and needed to pay for his medical costs for his time and stuff that he needed to go through. And man, I thought, I've gotten off really lightly, was my thoughts and feelings around that, and just massive amount of gratitude. So anyway, went around, got to thank him, shed a few tears, embraced him, hugged him. I've never seen him or spoken to him since. Fast forwarding, we carry on with cycle. That burden and that weight and that pressure is off now. Now I'm feeling a lot better. I can just focus on the courses, whereas before it was the courses, it was the content, it was the compressed learning environment with the stress of, I could be doing all of this and I'm going to jail next month, or in a few weeks' time. So anyway, now I'm into a better rhythm, getting through the courses, and then we got to the stage of, it's the day or 2 days before the badging ceremony. Might have been a couple of days before. Maybe 2 or 3 days before. I'm pulled into the office, speaking with the training warrant officer and the training officer at the time, and they're now telling me and letting me know that, hey, great, the court case has gone well, blah, 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 but we're going to RTU you back to your unit, return to unit, back to 1st Battalion for, I believe it was 6 months, which is still pretty light in the scheme of things, considering what I had done. We're going to send you back to your unit, 6 months. You'll come back next year, because we're nearing the end of this year now, and our bureau ceremony is only a few days away. You'll come back next year, join in with the next cycle. From this point on, it was probably going to be the patrol procedures phase, go through the patrol procedures phase again and carry on with the rest of the cycle. Then, complete all those courses, receive your bureau with the next intake. I was gutted and I was angry, because that wasn't what I was told when all this other drama, I guess, and I brought it on myself. I don't take anything away from that, but all this other stuff that I had brought on to myself, it was different from what I'd been told. And so I was told that all goes well, you don't go to jail, you'll be under, the eye is going to be on you, boy. You're going to be on probation, but all goes well, you complete everything, you'll go to an operational squadron. You'll definitely be needing to mind your P's and Q's, and I'm probably going to get all the crap jobs, which it didn't bother me. It's like, but then to hear that completely shifted and completely different to what I had been told, I wasn't on board with it. I for want of a better term, in that instant and in my mind, threw all my toys out of the cot. I was upset. I was angry, and I was like, "This isn't what you told me." And they then said to me, summarising at the end, okay, so we'll see you next year, and you come back on the cycle. You'll stay here. You'll see the guys. They'll go through their badging ceremony. Men that I felt, I've earned the right to stand next to them. I should be standing next to them. That's how I felt. But I'm not going to get to do that. And yeah, we'll see you next year. I'm pretty sure it was right there in that moment that I replied and said, no, I'll go to Australia. I was like, no, I'll go join the Australian SAS. And I think that caught them by surprise, and it even caught me by surprise, because now I'm 21 at this age, still young, and, you know, just the gall of this young fella to think he can, you know, hey, they're throwing me a lifeline, you know, they're giving me a lifeline to have the opportunity. The door's not shut on me. The door's still ajar. Actually, it's wide open. I was going to go pull my head in for 6 months. In the meantime, try to take the positives from that, then come back and then get back into cycle, know that I've been there before, know that I've completed all those courses before, and come in and try and smash them and do them even better. No, young, naive, immature Joe was like not having it. It's like, no. I thought, I'll get used. I'm going to go do the Australian one. And, I think it might have caught them by surprise, and we spoke a little bit more. I think there was a comment from the training officer at the time. You know, we do have a close connection with the Australian regiment, so it's not like. And I wasn't expecting, I can go there and they'll never know about it. I know that there's a connection there between the units and between the Defence Forces and the countries in general. So anyway, I was still pig-headed, and I was like, no, that's where I'm going then, if that's what you're doing. What made it worse for me then, Brian, was that I'm pretty sure it's the day before we all received our berets, me included, received a sandy beret, wing dagger stitched in, and we were told to shape them. You shape them before you receive, because there's nothing worse than putting on a beret that's unshaped and it's like this big ugly baker's hat you've got dropping around on your head. So I then was hanging on to a thread that, am I really going to be able to receive my beret on the day? Is it going to change? Am I going to, be able to go operationally into a squadron? Was it just a mistake? Was it a dream? I had all these things flashing through my head. Anyway, I received my beret, went through, shaped it like everybody else did the night before. We were all, excited, and I'm less excited, but I'm still a little bit excited because I've been given my beret and it's got my name in it on a piece of masking tape, because they wrote the names on, so they're handing them out because we had to give our sizes and stuff. Go through, shape it, and then we knew that we had to hand it back because they need them back, and they lay them out on the table, and then they call you out and all that sort of stuff, and then you go up and receive them. Well, a couple of things happened. Went through all of that, had my beret, shaped it. Then I got pulled into the CO's office at the time, and might have been with the it was with the RSM first. Another awesome man at the time. Had to hand my beret over. So I'd shaped it, name was in it, and he spoke with me and basically reiterated what the training officer and training warrant officer had said. Go back to battalion for 6 months, come back, blah, blah, blah. I still wasn't having it. And then he said to me, I hear your plan is to not come back and that you want to plan to go to Australia. And I just said, yes. I said, yeah, I'm going to go to Australia. I won't come back here. They tried to, and he tried to encourage me to, come back here. But again, I wasn't having it. I thought, to me, it felt like a big up yours from them to me after what I had been told and what I then was working so hard to do. It felt like I was just being flicked off. And so I reacted in the way that I reacted, rightly or wrongly. That's what I did. In hindsight now, would I have changed it? Probably not, just because of where I'm at now. And, would I have changed the incident that happened? Oh, yeah, absolutely. If I could have changed that and deleted that from my history, that would have been great to never have happened, but it did. Then anyway, I still wasn't in a good space in terms of being even remotely receptive to coming back the following year. Then I got pulled into the CO's office. The same sort of conversation took place. And I think it was at that time, it may have been at that time, or maybe not. Memory's a bit hazy here, but I remember being pulled into the CO's office and having a similar conversation. He asked me the same things, and I said, yeah, no, I'm not coming back. I'm going to go do the Australian one. And basically it was left at that. I went back to battalion. I did those things, and I started the process of looking at, okay, how do I get to Australia so I can do selection? So that's why I didn't receive my beret on the badging ceremony day with everybody else. I got to stand on the side we're behind the families that had come. So you're allowed to invite family members that you want to have. So all the boys had their key family members and spouses and partners there, because it's an awesome, celebration, an opportunity to celebrate the work that they've put in and done. I would have just invited my mum and my partner at the time, or my wife, who's now my wife, I should say. But I never got that opportunity, so I stood behind the families that were there seated in the front, which was fine. But probably the most gut-wrenching thing for me was having to stand there on the side and not be able to partake of that, not be able to officially receive my beret in that environment where I had felt I had earned it. It's particularly going through those things based on what I had been told. Looking at it now and thinking about, reflecting on it, even myself and some might look at it and say, well, you probably just behaved like a little brat. And that may be true, as I reflect on it. It is what it is, and that's how I felt at the time. And so I followed through on what I said I was going to do. And then, I never went back to the group. There was a couple of instances on a couple of training exercises where there was a cycle happening, a combat survival course, and our battalion was brought in to be part of that hunter force or the security for that particular aspect of the training. So I was on there, and I had one other catch up with a couple of the staff that were leaders on my cycle. And again, they spoke with me and asked me, are you coming back? Are you going to come back next year? And a few months had gone by now. It's not long to go, you're coming back. And I told them again, I said, no, I'm not coming back. I'm going to Australia. And I hadn't even confirmed anything with Australia yet.
Australia's waiting for you. Come on, bro.
There was no guarantee that I was going to get into the Australian Defence Force, let alone be privileged enough to do the selection, let alone get through that to get on cycle, etc. But I was that stubborn and pig-headed, and my mindset was, that's where I'm going. And that all helped with my selection and cycle, because I'd been through that. And again, reiterating what I'd mentioned earlier to the captain that asked me on the panel, which one's harder, I already knew I could do it because I've already done it. And the other key part for me was that my mindset was that if I failed an aspect of it, it didn't matter. I was going to go back and do it again. So failing something in my perspective in terms of that particular environment, if I had failed it and I wasn't deemed good enough to be there at that time, that would have just made me go away, work harder, get better, then come back. But because this wasn't a case of you are not good enough, you haven't proven that you're good enough, and I was being sent back because of the wrongdoing that I had done, which I accept responsibility for, I just took it as a kick in the guts. And I thought, well, stuff yous, I'm going to kick you in the guts too. And
Take that.
Yeah, take that. You've invested all this time and effort and energy and that into training me, and well, stuff you too. I'm not coming back. Real shot. So, that's where my headset was, or headspace was, and that's why I didn't receive and didn't have the privilege of serving in that unit with some really great people. But I've been fortunate enough to have awesome friends and wonderful people that I've built relationships with that have served in that unit, and some of them still serve there today. And just really good men, good people. So
that's an amazing story.
That's what you're looking for. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, Joe. Kia ora. No.
I think the word, probably more technical word you're looking for is, that's a very comprehensive answer, Joe. Thank you. You're welcome.
Outstanding. So, actually, I was thinking about this, and I remember that the kind of around that time, and you guys going off to Australia. All right. So obviously you got through that process and you got accepted, but there was, I think, around that time, East Timor came about somewhere in this period, and I believe you were Australian Army then. Were you infantry or were you SAS?
No, with 4RER, their commander unit.
Yeah.
So probably, I guess, a level in the, I guess, the realm or bracketing or tiering levels of special forces. Probably the next level down at the time from the Australian Special Forces of what they had. So SAS being their tier 1 or their elite part of the Special Forces. And then at that time where I was with the 4 RAR Commando unit would be the next level down, or a tier 2 type Special Forces, for want of a better term. They come under that, or I believe they did at the time, they came under a Special Forces bracket or umbrella, and they've certainly since then have gone on to solidify their stake and their claim as a valid Special Forces unit, post my time having the privilege of being able to serve there.
Yeah, I remember you had some photos, and probably this will lead us more so to you travelling, because this was in Sydney and you were going over to Perth
Mm.
eventually. But I remember you sent some photos of you in Timor, and I think there was kids around you and things, and you were in the Highlands, I guess, or I think that's what it was, you in the mountains. But there's one photo I remember, and there's some kids around you, and you're kneeling, but you had I believe you had an M4 or similar, and that's stood out in my mind because I was thinking, I'm sure the regular army uses the steyr as their primary weapon.
Yeah. So and I think at that time, from my memory anyway, parts of 4 RAR had the steyr and that as well, and I was lucky enough, and as well as probably most of, if not all of those in my patrol, we were running M4s, and I had the M4, the 203, or the 40mm grenade piece underneath, and so. I guess people that have a bit more of an idea and or have done some research or are interested in that sort of thing, sort of those types of things stand out. They're like, I thought the regular army uses the steyr, and other sort of more, I guess, special forces, for want of a better term, use like the M4 and those sorts of things. And that, I guess, is probably something that I haven't really thought about too deeply. I think initially when I was starting, going from the New Zealand part, and I was like, I thought, man, this style is awesome. Then I came across the M16s and stuff, because that's what we had on cycles. So bear in mind, the New Zealand one, only the patrol commanders had the Flash M4, which is the short version, and those of us on the cycle, the plebs, we had like an M16, which was a bit longer, bulkier, but I still felt it was cooler, because I was like, it's black, and it had this plasticky bits or whatever. They're like, this is a real weapon. That's what I was thinking at the time. But and then by the time I got to Australia, and then having that, I was so used to having that sort of weapon, and it just so happened to be that that's what they had. I was lucky. The ADF were really, I just want to sort of take a moment to acknowledge them, were really, really awesome. They were great in terms of supporting me with my transition over, far more than what I expected or thought would happen. So when I came over, they were really accommodating. They provided letters that I needed to show the New Zealand Defence Force that I had been accepted to go over, that I did have interviews planned, that I was undertaking testing on this time, and that all those things once they were done, that I do have an offer to come over and serve. What was disappointing was probably, just the amount of hoops that I needed to jump through from an NZDF perspective. It felt like, and I guess in hindsight again, maybe it was because at the time they were losing a number of people to the Australian Defence Force, and so they were trying to hold on to whoever they could, but I just felt like they weren't really supportive in helping me make this transition to go to another country and serve in another army. Particularly, I could probably understand if it was a country that was completely opposite or that we didn't have a close relationship with. But I thought, it's Australia. Like, they're the big brother, so to speak. Like, what is the big deal? Anyway, ADF was really accommodating. They provided me all that stuff. I was able to get over and then went through that process. And then in addition to that, the leaders there at the time, I didn't need to do the basic training again. What they did get me to do is I had to go and participate in what they called Frag Week on a core training for the infantry part of it, or on an infantry core training where they had a new M72 or 66 rocket launcher that was coming out, a new F1 grenade and all this sort of stuff. Other bits and pieces which I hadn't used in the NZ Defence, but part of that week was going to be validation and testing and training and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, no problem. So I went there, and then at the end of that, I was then asked which battalion I wanted to go to, or which unit I wanted to go to. And I knew that, well, I didn't know, but I'd heard that 4RAR was the next unit from the Australian Defence Force that was going to be deployed to East Timor. And I hadn't been yet. And so I said, oh, can I go to 4RAR Commando unit based in Sydney, Holsworthy Barracks? And it happened. And then once I got approved for that, they said, oh, whereabouts do you want to go within the unit? So you've got rifle companies and you have support company, and then you've got recon platoon. Well, for me, recon platoon was the place where I wanted to be. It was probably, again, more similar to the environment that I had completed with selection and with cycle and that sort of environment. So I said, oh, can I go to recon platoon? And again, they said, yep. And so they let me have my choices. So I got to go there, got to go to recon platoon, loved it. Some really good friendships and stuff made there. And a number of the guys, not only from 4RAR, but from the recon platoon that I was in, we were on selection together and we were on cycle together in the Australian one. So the bond just grew even tighter. And so, that was that piece of the puzzle in terms of getting to Australia and going through that process, B.
Beautiful. And that's actually a nice transition. So you're in Sydney, you're in Holsworthy, you've gone to Timor, this isn't in the initial instances of East Timor and all the troubles they were having there. This was a little bit later?
Slightly later. So I think the first flare-up probably happened in 99 or something like that, where more of the stuff was happening. So this is in 2000 by this stage, and beginning of 2001 when we actually deployed and went there for 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. So then you've gone there and said, well, okay, look, my big goal is to get to the regiment, which is all the way over in Perth. How did you start that process? How did you get there?
Well, I started it almost straight away. When I got to the Australian Army, even when I got to that frag week on that core training element of that course that was happening at the time, there just so happened to be I think he was a sergeant, corporal or sergeant, and he was a badged operator of the Australian Special Air Service. Stuck out because of the sandy beret and the wing dagger on his beret compared to everybody else's. He was on that frag week. He must have, because I didn't tell him, he came up to me, but he must have caught wind or heard that, hey, we've got this guy, he's done the New Zealand selection cycle, whatever. And in Australia, they called it, at the time, their Carter course. They called it a Carter course. And I had a few people when I got there going, oh, you've come over to do the real Carter course, have you? To join the real SAS? Just real naive, dumb people. That's the easiest way I could describe them, because here they are talking about something that they have no idea about. And so I just, I didn't say too much about it. I was like, oh, okay. And sort of brushed it off. But he came up to me and he was trying to help me and asked me, he said, oh, have you come over from NZ? Are you the guy that's done X, Y, and Z? And I was like, oh, yeah. And he goes, hey, nice to meet you. Shook my hand. I was like, oh, this is cool. And he goes, hey, I know there's a selection coming up soon, maybe in a couple of weeks' time. Did you want to get on that? And at that time, me being naive and not acclimatized to the environment, all I noticed was that it was hot. I was like, yeah, I'd be keen as. And he goes, oh, let me sort of find out. And so he went and asked and made a few phone calls, but he got back to me. And I think this was a blessing in disguise, and I'll explain why. But he come back and basically, he's like, no, it can't. It's already organised, booked. Everything's already set in motion. You wouldn't be able to get onto that one. You'll just have to wait till the next one comes around. I was like, cool. I was like, yeah, no worries. Thanked him anyway. And he was one of the instructors on that for that particular core training that was happening. So spoke with him a bit. Didn't really go and hang out with him because there's still that, I'm there with these core trainees to do this part. I'm not there as I haven't even been officially granted Australian citizenship to be a fully fledged ADF member at this stage. Everything is still subject to me getting citizenship, me completing what I needed to complete, or me completing what I needed to complete first, and then getting citizenship, etc. So there's still that barrier, and he was great as well. He was really professional about it. We didn't just go and hang out and talk to each other like we're mates. Like, he's this corporal, sergeant, NCO, it's feet together, corporal, sergeant, address them by their rank, etc. But in the moments where it's sort of downtime, it was more relaxed and we could talk a little bit. So that was cool. But anyway, we went through all of that, and then once we finished all of that, so to come back to your point about when did all that start, I tried to start straight away. Then had to wait, and then the deployment for Timor came up by the time I got to battalion. And then the next thing that came up was I couldn't deploy. I got pulled into my OC's office and into the CO's office at 4RAR, not because I was in trouble, but I was told that I can't deploy unless I'm a citizen of Australia. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I was thinking, well, I'm not going to be able to deploy. In my head, I'm thinking, well, sweet, more time to train for selection. That's all good. I'll do that. But at the same time, I was also mindful. I was like, I would like to go over with the team because I've built some good friendships and stuff now. The pre-deployment training's been going awesome, really nailing our roles for what we needed to do, etc. Anyway, maybe a week or two later, or not even that long, a few days later, I get called in again to my platoon or recon platoon's commanding officer's office, and basically given some instruction. Was it his or the CO's again? One of theirs was given instruction again and said, be at this place at this time was the Liverpool courthouse, this date and time for your citizenship ceremony, the swearing in. And I was like, oh, sweet, okay. So I went and I got my citizenship. Prior to that, there was a meeting that was organised. I had to go in. It might have been to the same place, and I had to answer a couple of questions with the lady behind the desk. It was just what seemed very informal, face-to-face. Asked me several questions. I answered them. Great, that's good. And then I guess from there was maybe where the communication got sent to the unit. Then I got called in and said, be at this place this time for your citizenship ceremony. So I ended up from woe to go. By the time all of this sort of came about, I got citizenship in a really short period of time, probably around about 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more, maybe slightly over. From once all of that realization that I couldn't deploy it came about to when I got citizenship was really, really quick. But that was awesome. So I went and did that. It was alphabetical order again, so I was sort of in the middle. There's quite a number of people. Got my certificate, got my photo, got my little trinkets that they had for us, and then we were all told, like even before we went up, and then just take your seat and wait till at the end when we all stand up and we'll all sing the Australian national anthem. That's what I was thinking. I was sitting there, typical New Zealander, and I was like, there's no way. I'm not staying here and I'm not singing this national anthem. And real naive and ignorant. Anyway, as soon as I got my certificate, I went and sat down. Now, you could get up and leave to go to the toilet if you need to go to the bathroom. So I had, and there were some other bits of paper, but I had my citizen's certificate one. So I tucked it underneath my shirt when I got back to my chair, left all my other stuff down, and then got up and walked my way and was making my way out the door. And I was quite in the middle of this big area too, the hall that we were in, making my way out, and there was a person standing there, oh, where are you going? I said, oh, I'm just going to the bathroom. I went out to the bathroom because one of the boys had brought me, he was a cop, but doing territorial force, and he was coming with us at 4AR to deploy on this operation. And he goes, oh, okay, yeah, just make sure you come back in after. And I was like, yeah, no worries. Went out, had a sneaky look behind me, wasn't looking. Scarpa did a runner out the door, straight in the car. I was like, let's go, bro. So, yeah, and then we headed off. So I avoided having to sing the national anthem. But as you can tell from my earlier experience that I shared, it caught up with me, didn't it? And
yeah, you should have.
Both verses. So maybe if I had stayed and sung with everybody else, I might have avoided that. But it caught up with me anyway. And multiple times since then, I've had the privilege and honour to stand and sing that national anthem as an Australian. So I'm fortunate to have dual citizenship, Australian citizen, New Zealand citizen. And I stand with pride when that national anthem is played. But I probably have a bit more pride when the New Zealand one is played.
Yeah, I get you. So I just want to. There's so much to really unpack. So you've gone across now. Let's just say we're fast forwarding. You're in the process.
Sorry, B.
No, you're fine. You're fine because this really sets the foundation. Because I guess it points out to all those aspiring operators, those that are looking to maybe perhaps even just in the Defence Force whoever's defence force, that that you're going to come across challenges, you're going to come across adversary. Sorry, it's just how do you deal with it? And if you're single-minded about your goal, you're going to hit it. So you get across. Let's just say we'll fast forward and we get across to Perth.
Yep.
So you're in selection there, and we know that you've gone through selection, and of course it's way easier than the New Zealand one. sorry.
Actually, just on that point, by the end of it, overall it was still easier, but certainly wasn't way easier as what it was on that day 3 or 4 when I had the initial panel. By then, it ended up being 18 days, 21 days.
Wow.
From memory, I think it might have been 21 days, but it certainly wasn't easier, and I came off that sort of similar weight actually, so I didn't go on as heavy. So I came off I went on that selection probably close to a ton, close to 100 kilos.
Yep.
But came off and finished around about the same weight, 77, 78 kilos. 78. So the New Zealand one, I was 10 kilos heavier and came off at that 77 to 79 bracket. This one I was, about 10 kilos lighter, but still finished up the same. So, that was interesting to me. Maybe my body was just, I think a lot more prepared, better prepared for it.
Yeah. So I guess it's just points out that mentally you've gone through a similar experience. It's prepared you for this. So even though it's same, but it's different, but it's the same. Mentally up here, it's allowed you to get through that. I guess that's a good lesson for all of us to that the failure. And I wrote this down. The failure is something that just drives you to work. Yeah. And so even though the New Zealand selection and cycle, well, you can't deem that a failure. That was foundation for what you went through in Perth. So there's a question actually I wanted to ask, particularly as you go through. So I'm assuming you have to go through cycle again with SASR.
Had to go through everything again. The selection and cycle would have been at least at that time. There's no guarantee just because you've passed one country or one unit's selection and cycle. There's no guarantee that you're going to pass the others, no matter how my mindset was wired, even though I knew that I was going to. You still need to walk that path. And I think at that time, at least for me anyway, it was good because you haven't backdoored it, if that makes sense. You can never be that guy that's looked at and gone, oh yeah, he came over from this unit, but he did. Hey B, so we probably won't use this video section of this recording, although you can if you want to. It doesn't bother me. But we got cut off during our recording, and I was talking about, you asked me about the Australian selection and cycle, and I spoke about, at that time, I needed to go through everything again, which I was grateful for. It was good, because I think the last part I was talking about, I touched on, is that I could never be then looked at as that guy that backdoored it into the unit, if that makes sense. So, because I had to go through the entire selection and cycle again, which is good. Which is a good thing. And there was also, I was in the middle of mentioning, that there was another Kiwi guy already there. I don't think it'll matter if I mention his name, but his name is Eugene Hunia. He was there. He changed over from the New Zealand SAS to the Australian one, from what I've came to learn and understand, but awesome fella. But anyway, I divert a little bit, but he went through selection and everything again, but I think he took a slightly different route. I think he went over to Australia and joined the reserves, or the TF, and then he went through that way. But from what I've been told anyway, I don't think I actually ever confirmed that with him, even though I spent a little bit of time getting to know him briefly in and around the barracks, but we were in 2 different squadrons. But just on that about, that's just how I was feeling. So I could never be looked at or judged as the guy that backdoored it into the unit, trying to live off my merits of completing the New Zealand selection cycle, because really all I had really done, I hadn't served operationally with the unit, so I had just completed selection and cycle. That in itself, for me anyway, personally,
was an achievement. But I knew it was only the beginning. Like I knew without a doubt that was just the absolute beginning of my career, of what I anticipated to be a long career within the unit. And if it wasn't going to be long, it was going to be cut short at some point. So yeah, that's the way it was at that time anyway, sort of trying to get back on track. But since then, and even while I was there were people that had come over that didn't need to go through selection, and they also didn't need to go through the whole cycle. I think a couple of guys that came over potentially from SBS, maybe only did some sort of, I guess you might call it a bridging type piece in terms of courses. And then again, I don't even know if that's accurate. So they might not have had to do any of that. The difference being there is that, those guys are bringing over years and years of operational experience, at the pointy end of the spear, so to speak. And so I personally had and have no problems with guys that are able to come over and join another Special Forces unit if they've got that that proven record in the bank, So there's no questioning their ability. There's no questioning their mental and physical ability to be able to perform that job, and there's no questioning their ability to perform under pressure. And so, because they've got that proven track record, so that this isn't to try to cast a shadow over anybody that's that's transferred from, and I'm just speaking from the Australian side, that's transferred from another Special Forces unit, bringing all those years of experience, operational experience at that, and then coming into a unit like the Australian SAS. I think that's really smart, to be honest. I think it's clever in terms of leveraging the experience that you're going to gain from those operators that come over, and I think they know as well inside themselves that they offer a lot. They offer a heck of a lot. Operational experience in theatres that the unit may not have as much experience in, as an example, and or just that boots on the ground, potential connections, potential understanding of locations that may come in handy, just stuff like that. So, and I didn't carry or have any of that. And so in my case, 100%, I should have to go through everything again, because I haven't been there and done those things like these other people have. So I just wanted to try to clarify that, because we got cut off, and then you can hopefully insert this piece into part 2 just as that filler. All right, bro, and then we'll carry on from wherever it is on part 2. Cheers, Bella.
There's a question actually I wanted to ask you, Joe. Now you've looked at the selection cycle and stuff, but particularly when you're going through cycle, is there a particular course or courses that you really enjoyed, or you thought, man, that was cool?
Yeah, yep, there are. The courses that I remember that I really, really loved was the parachuting one, for starters. So that was just jumping out with the roundies, the T10s out of the Herc. So I really enjoyed that. That was cool. I preferred the water jumps more than the land jumps, and to be fair, I did way more water jumps in the Australian one than I did in NZ. Just trying to think of if we did any water jumps in NZ. I don't think I can't remember doing any water jumps in the New Zealand one. I'm sure we would have. But anyway, the water jumps were way better because the landings are softer. and probably the only caveat to that was in the Australian one, I was thinking I was still that, by the time I was on cycle and doing that course in particular, I'm thinking sharks.
Yeah, sharks.
Perth, warm water, nice beaches, sharks. Okay, I'm going to have my knife. I'm going to have a knife here, and I'm going to have a knife there, so that, I can grab those if I need to. But that was my mindset in there. And then as it said, we never once came across sharks, but there's just some cool stuff in the water jumps that you could do. You could surf, like once you hit the water, if the Zodiac that you've dispatched out of the Herc is further away, rather than just popping the Cape well and then dragging in the chute and everything like that, or putting your fins on and then swimming and kicking your way there to the boat. If you did everything right and you always turn into the wind, then you come down and land, you'll be slightly on your back. The boat hopefully behind you or right next to you, depending on how you've timed your landing or where you've drifted to, where you've steered yourself to. You could then surf to get to the boat, so then save some time and energy. So it's like, that was cool, and then pop the cape well. But if you didn't, and when you're new like I was and didn't understand, and then you popped your cape well and did the drill as per exactly, well, then you got a blinking long little dog paddle swim with the pack and everything, and you got a kick to get there, and everybody else is either nearly there or you're trying to race your mates to get there. So those things were cool. Never encountered any sharks, which was great. It's grateful for. Other parts that I really loved was the patrol procedure stuff. So the jungle phases of the course. Loved those aspects of it. Just the whole environment and the discipline around it to operate and function in those environments. I really was drawn to and am drawn to, and the counter-terrorism stuff. That was. I loved that aspect of it. The validation parts of it that you need to meet in terms of the shooting skill and aspects of it. The teamwork that's involved in terms of how you're flowing through or operating, that slow is smooth, smooth is fast mentality and approach. Those would be my 3 top favorite ones, and I would put all of them as number 1 because if I had any one of them, any one of them I would love to do and be part of. So those are great from a training perspective. But yeah, I enjoyed the whole cycle. The combat survival was good. Even experiencing to a much lesser degree the resistance to interrogation phase. You don't enjoy it at the time, but if there's anything that particular course taught me personally was don't get caught. That's all that taught me.
Here's a tip.
This is just a fraction, just not even scratching the surface of more than likely what it would be like if we did get caught on operations. So that's all that course taught me, but that's a good lesson in and of itself as well. Don't get caught. But yeah, I loved everything about cycle.
Nice. Okay, I'm gonna move now, and I think the last couple of things I wanted to cover, which again, depending on how we go, might take a little while. Is we'll transition to operations. So you're going to into a squadron, and I'm assuming you would have gone through the ceremony. You've got the beret and help the family are there and to support you and things like that. And I want to talk about more of the family a little bit later, but the operational part of it. I'm assuming you've been operational. Yeah. All right. So, what did that feel like the first time you found out you were being made? You were going on operations. Did you get like in the movies? You could wear a beeper, a pager, and it goes off in the middle of the movies, and you have to run. Kiss your wife goodbye and say, "I'm off." Was it like that?
No, it was nothing like that. At least not for me. That during that time though, when I was in pages or notice to move, we're still in place. We're in place, and at that time, to be honest, we still didn't have smartphones. So, I was running a Nokia, little Nokia phone where you got to push the button 10 times to get the letter that you want if you're sending a text. It was nothing. I wasn't on a pager. Wasn't any notice to move. That first experience in operation was, to answer your question, was exciting. It was time now for validation. Like, this is what all the work has been for. This is what the training has been for. Has led to this point. That it's just a matter of time. If you're fortunate enough to make it into that sort of unit, that it's just a matter of time before you're going on operations. And if you don't want to go on operations, then you're in the wrong job. Much like if you don't like being wet, cold and hungry, then you're in the wrong job. If you don't want to be hot, sweating and dehydrated, then you're in that wrong job. You shouldn't be there. How you got there, if you don't like any of that stuff, or if you can't deal with any of that stuff, is a miracle if you still made it to that stage. So, reality then also starts to set in, because now at least for me, my mindset's, there's that initial excitement. Okay, this is happening. This is real. We're getting ready. We've got our warning orders and we're mobilised and we're getting everything ready. Then there's that aspect of you've got
in my case at the time, you've got your wife and you've got a child and you've got another one on the way, and there's things that then start to occupy your mind. Okay, the reality is this is happening. We know the nature of this type of work. My wife understands that as well, as do all the spouses and wives when they're, saying goodbye to or saying see you later to their husbands that are getting ready to deploy on operations. There's a strong reality that not all of us are coming back. So those things come into play, but I think for me, at least in my experience anyway, I don't remember ever really dwelling on that, ever really having that occupy my mind to the point where I ever had any doubts. Like that just didn't, I don't remember that existing in my head for me. Like I was too busy preparing and getting stuff ready or doing what I needed to do based on what the patrol commanders have asked or what we needed to get ready for the tasks to be thinking about that stuff, if that makes sense. Not to disregard my wife and our children and stuff, but I was just too tied up and busy. I needed to make sure that what I was doing was done in the correct manner, was done in a timely manner, and was done in the way that it needed to be done so that it could improve our chance of success on operations, if that makes sense.
So putting yourself in a mindset that allows you to succeed, knowing, but it must have been comforting knowing that with your family that all is well.
Yeah.
That must be it must have lifted a huge burden from you.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Like my wife is just a very strong and resilient woman. So she coped and dealt with things, and like right from the start, even before I did. So I met her before I did the New Zealand selection. I met her a few months before, and I had let her know that this is what I was doing, and there was nothing that was going to stop me from doing it. I'm not doing this because of a girlfriend or a relationship, and I'm not going to leave if I'm asked to leave. That was how I was wired before I started. Well, lo and behold, before I even did selection, I had already given my heart and my mind to my now wife before I even went on selection. So within something strange happened within the few months leading up to selection, that I was prepared that if she had have asked me to not do it or to not go, or even if I had have made it and then if she had have asked me to, can you leave, I would have left. And I remember distinctly being asked that question by the female psychologist that was on the New Zealand selection at the time during an interview. And she asked about if I had a partner or whatever, and I said yes. And she goes, "Oh, how would you feel? How does she feel about you doing this?" I said, "Oh, she's supportive. She's been good." She goes, "Oh, how would you feel what would you do if she asked you to leave?" And without hesitation, I said, "Oh, I would leave." And I saw her body language, the sight change, and she sat back and she said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And then she leaned forward again. She said, "Why is that?" And I said, "Well, because I love her, and this unit and this work is awesome. It would be great if I could make it here, but it's just a job, and my job's not always going to be there for me." This was me speaking still at the 20 years of age, just speaking honestly to a question that was posed to me, what would I do? And so at that time, I didn't say this to Helen because I didn't want her to ask me to not go on selection because I wanted to do it. But internally, I had already made up my mind that if she had have asked me, I would have left. I wouldn't have gone, and I would have gotten out. I remember her saying to me in a conversation that we had before I'd gone, she said, "I would never ask you to leave anyway." And I thought to myself, well, that's nice, but we'll see. Like, just my interpretation of that lifestyle was that it's a single person's lifestyle. It's not designed to be family friendly. It's quite selfish in the role and the work that's required. And not in a bad way. I mean, not for, not selfish pride reasons, but selfish in the sense that it's very time consuming, and the work that you're doing is for others, and in particular for those people that you're going on operations with. Anyway, she was quite taken back by that, but I explained my reasons to her. Like, my family is always going to be there for me. People that I love are always going to be there for me. This job won't be. And so that was my take. And at the end, I remember at the end of that New Zealand selection, she came up to me and she congratulated me, and she just said very simply, she said, "I'm so glad you made it through." And that meant a lot to me at that time, just to hear her, the psychologist, mention that, because, you know, they do play a key part in terms of the psychological makeup of people that get through the unit. And I didn't realise how much until later on, until I was able to be directing staff and stuff on selection courses and things like that. So, yeah, the piece around operationally and thinking about those things, yeah, I was in a flow state. Like I was enjoying what I was doing. There was an elevated sense of purpose, if that makes sense, knowing that my family is good, that my family is well, and that I had her support, that she's got my back, and that she's going to be okay here. At that time, she's going to be okay in Australia. It's a safe place. She's got everything that she needs. My will and everything was in place, you know, things, and I knew insurances and stuff were in place. So I felt a lot more comfortable knowing that my family was going to be okay should the worst happen. Yeah.
So you get that, and you got everything in order, and you've prepared yourself well. Yeah, just like your brothers around you. Yeah, so you hop on the transport, you got all your kit and everything like that. And then, what was it like? What was it like to go that first step, or that first drive
in country?
In country. What were you feeling?
What was I feeling? I was feeling a heightened sense of self-awareness and things happening around me. That's what I felt, because now it's real. You're on what operators and Defence Force personnel will affectionately refer to as, you're now on the two-way range, where bullets can come back at you and things can hurt you. You're not just shooting these cardboard targets or these mechanical targets or these metal targets that go ding and you go, yes, I got it. You're now, you're on the flip side of that, where they've been practicing on similar targets and or moving targets as well. And for me, a heightened sense of self-awareness and things happening around me, which was really cool for me personally. Like it felt good. I felt like I was in the zone. I felt like I was where I needed to be mentally, and I knew that I was, from a personal self-confidence perspective, I knew I was where I needed to be, not only physically but more so mentally. So I felt confident going in, first time wheels up in country, and first time boots on the ground in country. I felt confident because of the people that I had been through all this training with, this process with, the experiences that we've shared. I'd been through that stuff with them, or we'd been through it together. So I felt confident and ready, and whatever was going to happen was going to happen.
What was the most challenging thing you faced? Challenging situation?
There are a number of challenging situations, but it'd be hard to pick an individual one. I guess being in contact and having rounds come back at you, and having RPGs set at airburst go off in front and around you, and kicking up stones and dirt, and getting reasonably close to you or getting uncomfortably close to you, and hearing the sonic crack was past.
Sorry, did that make you feel scared?
No, not in that moment.
No?
In those moments, no. It made, again, the awareness level, at least in my experience, and from what I observed of the guys that I operated with, just increased, just went up another level. So you have moments of downtime and quiet, and then all of a sudden, crack,
boom.
Something goes, and you need to, and a lot of it is reacting, or a lot of it can be reacting, I should say. But there's quite a lot of elements in the nature of the work where it's deliberate, because the whole intent is to not be compromised and to not stick out and have those situations, is to try to have and keep that element of surprise as our ace up our sleeve for the work that we do. So, I'm just trying to think. I want to be really transparent here in terms of, was I scared?
Or maybe the other word would be, did you feel that fear? Maybe that this is actually happening, or was it just that you were so used to your training that just automatically kicked in, and it wasn't something you thought about until, say, after? So, whoa, that just happened.
Yeah, I think that's more accurate, B. I think it was a case of an afterthought. It's like, man, that was close. Far out. I can, I clearly recollect and can hear the sound of those rounds whizzing past. But in those moments, from my experience and just trying to teleport myself back there now mentally, the heightened awareness of things and looking around at my brothers that were just into gear, like they were just doing what needed to be done. There's rounds going down range, the vehicles are being maneuvered strategically in tandem with the operators, giving cover support whilst we move up and press and then lay down support, whilst heavier weapons are used to take out their vehicles, so to disable their means to maneuver as quickly or as not so much smoothly, but more so as quickly, as rapidly as what we were able to by taking out their resources, or in this case their vehicles, with weaponry that they didn't have. And so it must have been an afterthought in terms of, wow, we could have been done here if things hadn't quite gone the way that they turned out. So in the moment, and I think that's a combination of the training that happens as well. So yes, controlled environment, controlled as much as it can be, but you're still using live ordnance, you're still using live rounds, you're still shooting rounds past each other from time to time, and you're still in those close quarter environments where things are cooking off and buzzing off around you. So I think all of that combined certainly helps, because without that, I just think I wouldn't have been as prepared for that. None of us would have been as prepared for that. So due to the nature of the work, I think helped me and helped us kick into gear with what we needed to do and how we needed to respond and react for those different situations.
I can imagine that, again, this is just based on all the things I've seen or read on YouTube or what have you. So, I'm in no way, and disclaimer, no way in any shape or form military or been exposed directly with this, other than hearing your shared experiences, of course. But I can imagine that you've perhaps gone through, you've had contacts or a number of contacts, you've experienced that. I suspect that you can still hear the sounds of what different weapons sound like, and you could probably that was an AK, or that was an AR, or whatever. I suspect you can still hear that in your mind quite clearly. But I wonder, being with an Australian unit, and even so with the Kiwi unit, but more so with the Australian unit and your Australian brothers, and I suspect there was a degree of hijinks going on as well. There was a bit of let's just say banter or pranking happening. Would that be true?
Yeah. 100% true. I mean, having a sense of humour is critical for that type of. I think, it's critical for any sort of role or work. It's critical for whether you're a parent. It's critical for whether you're a student. It's any industry that you work in. A sense of humour is vital. And the boys have. And I use that term respectfully because at the time when I was serving anyway, it was just males. So when I use that term, it's not meant to exclude females. From what I understand, females are able to apply for and join the SAS or the Special Forces, and more power to them if they want to do that. That's their own decision. So I just wanted to clarify that. So the boys have got a very interesting and unique sense of humour. We're probably all wired a little differently, but there's some funny stuff, man. As I just think about that, there's one, I wasn't there for this one, but I've seen the photos of it. Now, there's a couple of guys, and this is in the Australian one. You have been in such close proximity, close quarters, through selection, through cycle, pretty much warts and all type situations with each other. And so when you're out on operations and you're flat desert, as an example, and you've got to go to the toilet and you need to do a number 2 or whatever that is, you go out, there's nowhere to hide. Like, there's nowhere to go, I'll just go behind that bush or that rock over there. It's like, this is our lie-up position. You stay relatively close within that. You're not going to, crap in your own home or in your own yard, so to speak, but You're not going to go wandering off, 5 clicks so that people have to get the binoculars out to see where you are, sort of thing. There's never going to be any of that. It's literally, a few meters off to the side. And you've got the boys providing cover. There's always lookout in your lie-up points and in the position that you're in. And the photo that I saw of a couple of the guys, crack up fellas, free fallers, A-troopers, so really good guys. So you have free fallers, you have water operators, and you have vehicle mounted in the Australian one. And so in terms of the insertion skills, anyway, these guys, one of them is out number 2, so pants are down, backside's there in the photo, and one of the boys decides, he goes, "Don't worry, bro, I got you." Comes straight up behind him, and he's over his shoulder with his weapon, and he's while the bro is trying to do his business in the middle of the desert. The boys are up mounting the weapons in the turrets of the vehicles, keeping an eye out. But you can't help but to glance over, I would imagine, because I wasn't there for this particular. I wish I was, but you can't help but glance over. And then the boys tell the story. They're like, "Man, it was so funny, it was so hilarious," they're cracking up about it. But just that attitude is like, "Don't worry, bro, I got you." He's literally resting his weapon on his shoulder. And he's like, "I got you, bro. You do what you need to do." And they're telling the story. And I'm just cracking up. It's so funny. And then you see the photos of that, and you're just like, "Man, these guys are crazy clowns." Yeah, blinking. Who'd have thought that this is the elite of the defence force right now in operations? But it's those things, man, that really bond the guys together, that bond your people together, that make those really challenging and difficult situations, whether that's just time being away from home and family, whether that's struggles with personal stuff, whether that's mental stresses, whether that's relationships. Maybe you had a bad conversation or with your spouse or partner, or maybe you received some bad news that somebody's become terminally ill or has passed away, but you're still expected to go and try and function at a high level on those jobs. And so just those moments, man, where the boys have got your back, literally, in their case, is really, they're gold. And I can't, there's so many little experiences like that, but that's one that just always stands out in my mind. I wish I had been there for that one, but there's been other similar ones that I've been lucky enough to be a part of. I haven't been on the end result of one of those, so I haven't been in that situation where I've been the person trying to take care of my business and somebody's come up and kindly said they've got my back and "Don't worry, bro, I got you." So I'm glad that hasn't happened. But there's been a number of other the term spooning comes to mind as another situation when you are freezing cold and you got very little, next to nothing on because you're trying to keep warm and you're in combat survival mode. You will try to get warm as best you can, and sometimes that means spooning your brothers. And so that's been it's just those little things that you think about it at the time. You're like, there's no way you would ever let a person, particularly a male, get that close to you in any situation. When you're freezing cold, though, and you're hungry and you're tired and you're trying to keep warm, it's like, "Here, bro, come on in." Come here, bro.
The more the merrier.
Yeah. Come here. Hadamai, bro, don't worry, it's all right.
We're all fine, though.
Yeah. So, hard case, but those, there's, oh man, my mind is just buzzing now. Yeah.
I bet, but I suspect that that you're in country, you're operational, but there must have been moments where you had the opportunity to connect back home and talk to your family.
Oh man, yeah, crack up. It's funny you mentioned that, to connect back home. So the Australian one, we didn't have, when we were operational, we weren't able to, well, unless it was just me, but we weren't able to send emails. We couldn't send emails home. If we were, I never did. I wrote a letter. I probably wrote maybe one or two. I don't even know if my wife still has them. And so guys would do that. There was sat phones, but they weren't secure and all that sort of stuff. So I think unless there was a real emergency, we would have had the opportunity to speak with our families. But I know, that first deployment, I never spoke to or heard my wife's voice. And that was a good thing. We had sort of, good in terms of what my wife and I had planned to discuss prior to deploying. Like, if you don't hear from me, that's a good thing. If you don't hear from the unit, that's a good thing. would I have liked to have heard her voice? Yeah. But we made do with what we could, and there were various operational security reasons why we couldn't do emails or make calls and that sort of stuff. So that was all good. I understood that, and I think we all did. What we did get, though, the opportunity to connect back home was we would receive letters. The guys that would receive letters. And, oh, man, I remember we had been out on task for a while. We were at a particular airbase that we had secured, so we had to approach that and do a sort of deliberate clearance on that particular airfield. So we took control of that. That went really smooth and well. There was no resistance, for want of a better term, there. And in that space, we were there, held up there for a while we were waiting, I guess, for the leaders and that to get other communication where we're going to push forward, push further into this particular area, etc. And then we received mail and stuff came. And I remember in a letter, so she must have got my letter, I don't know if she still has it, asking for, certain things. I wanted some of these nut muesli bar things, which are just different nuts with some honey and stuff on them, and they were really nice anyway. And I was like, yeah, can you send me some of those? Anyway, I didn't realise that the boys would get so much mail. I got one parcel, one parcel with these muesli bars, and I think it might have had a letter or something in there, I love you or whatever. And the boys, they had some guys had boxes and boxes and letters and parcels upon parcels, and I was like, what the, how, maybe I've got some more stuff coming. I was thinking, maybe this has been, obviously we've been here for a few months, so there must have been storing stuff up, and this is an opportunity where it's coming. I was like, oh yeah, I must have a few more parcels coming. Nah, zero. Parcel. And that was it. And I was like, man, I think about that now. When I was thinking about these experiences, I just laugh about it, because I think they must have looked at me and gone, what a loser. Like, does your wife not love you or something? But I looked at that and in hindsight, I haven't really spoken about it with my wife. I think maybe recently, but I've looked at it and gone, man, their wives must really love them. Jokingly saying that to my wife, and she's like, yeah. She said something cheeky in reply. She's like, yeah, don't worry about it, babe. That's all right. All in the past, sort of thing. But yeah, that really stands out to me in terms of just communicating with your spouses and partners. That aside, even though I was somewhat down about only getting one parcel, I was really grateful for the parcel that I got. Like just the small treats that were in there, the information and the little letter and stuff that was in there. I'm not the sort of person that holds on to letters or cards, or even my wife calls them their special creations that our kids have made from a young age. Like, if they're not looking, I'll chuck that in the rubbish. Like, soon as it's like, yeah, thanks, son. Thanks, darling. Yeah, beautiful. Look at it. When they're not looking, it'll be like, shh. It's like, yeah, we don't need to keep collecting that. But there are some things that have been held onto. But I have to admit, my letters sent to me, or letter sent to me, but letters sent to me haven't been things that I've held onto. Perhaps I should have, for our kids to read, but and even just for myself to reflect on, but I haven't done that. But yeah, that was hard case when you talk about opportunities to connect with home and your loved ones. So yeah, and I'm not sure what it's like now. I've been out of the game for a long time, well over a decade now. But I would imagine that potentially, I like to think that there's probably better means and more secure means for the personnel that serve in the Special Forces, or use the term personnel rather than the boys, to contact their loved ones. So I'd like to think that there's probably better avenues for them to do that these days.
Nice. Actually, the thoughts come to mind. It's funny hearing you talk about these stories. It shows again that human aspect. I guess the general public see. Again, I'm probably generalising here, but we probably see Special Forces as like you would see on Call of Duty, right? As your boys, so you can quick scope with a sniper rifle from 3,000 meters away, 3-click, and still hit somebody, or things like that. Or you have unlimited ammo, so you don't have to reload. Things like that. You don't get fatigued, or or if you get hit, you respawn.
Yeah, whatever that is. You know what? When you say that,
Come on now.
because I'm not, I don't know what those games involve. I've seen my boys play Fortnite, and that, I probably would have loved playing games like that growing up if it was around. But in my day, it was like Street Fighter and Final Fight and Double Dragon. Those were games.
Defender.
Yeah. Defender, which I was terrible at too, by the way. But Gallagher, I like that. But those sorts of games. And then these days, I really haven't paid any attention to sort of what those games involve. I've heard of them and I've seen pictures of them, and then I see other ones like Spec Ops or whatever games and stuff that are out there. And I don't know, because I haven't been on them. I've seen bits and pieces of when they run around and they jump off things and grab all these different weaponry and use them, and I think, oh, that's interesting. But I don't really know how that world operates these days.
How would we do that?
Oh, that guy's mean as he's just chopping everybody up with his pickaxe.
So I guess just one last thing I wanted to touch on. I know we've only just touched on the operational side of it. Now I want to touch post special forces in a second. But you're operational, and even not just operational. Perhaps in training courses where you cross train with other special forces units from around the globe.
Yep.
One, how have you found it? And two, who do you rate?
Who do I rate? I think how have I found it? I'll try and do that. How I found it, and then who do I rate? So I found it really educational. For me, I found it interesting to see the different perspectives of UK operators, of Kiwi operators, of American operators, and then people that come or have Royal Marines or various other special forces units, Rangers. You've got your SEALs and the Delta guys and all that sort of stuff. You've got your 22 SAS and you've got SBS guys. Not that I wouldn't say that I've had as much exposure to all of those for as long a periods of time as I would like, or as I would have liked. But my exposure and time with them that I was privileged enough to have, to be fair, I rate all of them. I rate all of them in the context of what they bring, what they do, what they've gone through to get there, and how they apply their craft. If you were asking me in terms of where do they rank, and or where does New Zealand rank, or where does Australia rank, I think that's too difficult, at least in my experience, or I would say my limited experience, to be fair, to give an accurate representation. What I can speak to and say is that I feel that New Zealand and Australia are really well trained. I think that shows through the level of skills that are developed or that are targeted and that are compressed into a short period of time, that drive you to have to meet the minimum standard in order to progress. But then beyond that, the continued pursuit to improve, to get better, is constant. So there's a saying within the unit, a daily renewable contract, and it's probably similar to across all the special forces. And what that means, at least in my view, and the way I've had it put across to me in a conversation as we've been going through those processes, is that your spot here is not guaranteed. Your spot here is not forever. Your spot here is only as good as you continue to show up each day and continue to perform what's required to the minimum standard at the very least, while striving to look to improve beyond that. And so because of that mindset, and because of the respect that I have for those individuals that have gone through those things and those elements in their training, you'd be hard pressed, I would say, to narrow it down to a particular special forces is better than this particular special forces because of this. They're all very highly trained and skilled. Some through necessity. New Zealand I'll use as an example, and to a degree Australia, out of necessity, need to be more cross-trained and across a broader skill set of things, because our numbers are not as large as what these other countries have within their defence forces. At the same time, those special forces, if you look at America, for example, still very, very highly skilled and cross-trained. in if not the same amount of things, or possibly more. So who's to say that then they don't sit at the top of the food chain in terms of cross-training and ability, if that makes sense. So I would struggle personally to rate a particular unit above the others, but from a broad perspective in terms of who has more equipment and all those sorts of things and resources behind, absolutely my experience has been the Americans. They've got significant resources that just countries like New Zealand, Australia even, and probably even to a degree UK just don't have, at least in the time that I was serving. It may have evened out now with the UK and US in particular. Probably not so with New Zealand. New Zealand would probably be the no-frills PAMS version when it comes to resources and equipment in comparison. You know, if you were comparing types of equipment with stuff that's probably outdated, you know, we're getting, and I don't know if that's still the case now, but, you know, probably the stuff that we've got in New Zealand as an example would probably be more dated than what operators are using these days in other countries and other more financially and technically advanced countries, if that makes sense.
That's interesting, because you do hear that chatter on different media about who's the best at this and who's best at that, and I think you summed it well. They're all the best. You know, it's just different contexts, different mindsets even, because of just, you know, the experiences and when they come from. I guess one follow-up question with that is, which group did you enjoy hanging out? I mean, socially or personally, that you really connected with? That's an awesome question. To be honest, I enjoyed socializing and spending time with, in my experience anyway. You're talking about collectively all the different groups, like Americans, the Brits. Oh, okay. Sorry, that's different. I was thinking you were talking about just between New Zealand and Australia. I enjoyed my time with all of them. Because they each brought something different, like a different element of their sense of humour, a different perspective, or their take on a task or a job, whether that was whilst still serving in the Defence Force or whilst it was in the private sector. So they brought, in my experience, different viewpoints, different opinions, different sense of humour, a different mindset around all the different things that we were working on at that time, whether it was to plan a task, to take a group of people or person A to point B, or this group of people from point A to point B, whether it was how we conducted things once we're in location, whether it was the opinions of how we extract out of there or withdraw or come back, or whether it was a viewpoint around what if actions on, what do we do if this happens, what do we do if that happens, what do we do if this doesn't happen. So I enjoyed my time with all of them. From a social setting perspective, probably again, I didn't have any dramas with hanging out with any of those from any of those groups in whatever setting, whether that was at a pool table, shooting some pool, whether it was relaxing, watching a movie, whether it was playing a guitar or trying to play a guitar or learning something from them, whether it was just having a conversation about what life is like for them in their home or what their families are up to or how many children they have. Engaging with and connecting with those people has certainly been a highlight of something that I've been privileged to enjoy. Yeah, for me. Nice, beautiful. And I think that leads nicely into my last part, which is post Special Forces, post SASR. How did that come about? And how did you feel once you started to make that transition into civilian work?
Yeah, man. Strap in, brother. It's probably a long answer.
I'm just going to go to the bathroom. So you carry on.
Well, don't worry. I'm still listening, okay? Don't worry.
Listening. If you hear a flushing... Oh, sorry, Joe. Sorry. Mute. Sorry, bro.
Yeah, no need to be sorry. That's good. Great question. There's a lot to delve into and unpack here. I'll do my best to try to do that as well as I can, but with as much information as I can that will hopefully be relevant for our listeners, and or whether they be former members or whether they're not, and try to apply that into
what some people might call, once you're out of the army, you're now in the real world, into some sort of real world context. So how it came about was a combination of things, how me transitioning out of the Australian SAS. Unfortunately, at a time, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, I joined the unit in the army with the sole intention of wanting to be a soldier, to be an operator, to just use me until I can't do the job anymore type thing. That was my mindset. I want to deploy, I want to be active, and this is what I want to do. I didn't join for the purposes of marching around on a parade ground, or worrying about how shiny my brass is, or worrying about how many millimeters or centimeters my ribbons or medals need to be above my left breast pocket, or wherever it needed to be on my uniform. And that's just, how I understood basic training, core training, certain parades. There's going to be time when you need to stand on parade and you need to do those things out of respect and acknowledgement for significant events or whatever's happening. I get that. But I also never joined with any aspiration, rightly or wrongly. This is me just, no filter, nothing out of bounds. I never joined with the intent or aspiration of wanting to go up the ranks. It was never my intention to be a lance corporal, a corporal, a sergeant, a patrol commander, a staff sergeant, a warrant officer, an SSM, to transition or migrate over to becoming an officer. They didn't exist in my young, naive mind. And even once I made it into that unit with a little bit more wisdom, a little bit older, a little bit wiser, that's debatable in some cases from some people, but that just never was a mindset. Some people might look at that and go, well, that's a pretty poor attitude. You're not looking to aspire to grow and develop. Maybe it depends on perspective. I may not be looking to grow and develop from the point of view of where they see themselves growing and developing. If growth and development to them means go up the ranks, then my viewpoint is different to them. I had no aspiration to go up in rank. I had no aspiration to stay or to gain any rank. I would have gladly done my 20 years, if I could still serve as an operator, as a trooper, which is the equivalent of a private, if I was afforded that opportunity, or if I had that opportunity to do that. And I would have been happy. I know I would have been happy. People can say, well, how could you know? You don't know that. It's like, well, I knew I was happy in that time that I was in, and it never changed. So anyway, the Australian piece of it, a subject course came about. So this is sub 1 or sub 2 for corporal, whatever it was. And they're promotional courses. They're courses that you go on. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to get promoted straight after. It doesn't mean that you're going to go up in rank or anything like that. And I understand that. But for me, it was a complete waste of time. It's a part of my life that I'm now going to have to go and spend months doing, learning to bark orders on a parade ground. And I can already yell. I don't need to stand on a parade ground and give command or instruction. Like, I can yell, no sweat. I can follow the patter. So the patter in terms of the structure and order of how the drill needs to happen, because I've been on the receiving end of it for so many years, because it was part of the process to go through the army, etc. And I feel that I can deliver instruction when it comes to providing clear instruction around what needs to happen, job specific in relation to whatever needed to be taught that I might have knowledge or skills in. All of that stuff combined then with I guess, I don't know if bureaucracy is the right word, but I'll use that term because it's the only word I can think of right now. In terms of the parade ground stuff, the camp soldier is that way I would term it, just really didn't appeal to me at all. And I had no desire to want to go and spend a few months of my time being in that space and doing something that wasn't making me happy, and something that I felt was causing me to waste time in where I could be improving in the parts that were core to my role. My primary objectives as an SAS operator does not involve marching around a parade ground, does not involve shining and polishing brass or worrying about my ribbons, does not involve making sure that I've got certain creases on my uniform in certain places of my uniform, so that my boots and shoes are polished to the highest, so I can have a mirror reflection. Those things that are important when, in my view, when you're starting, when you're coming into the army. But where I was at in my career, they held no place. Now, rightly or wrongly, for me, they held no place in what I wanted to do, where I felt I was of more value and service. Now, hindsight, looking back on that, hey, maybe that was a dumb approach, but that's where I was, and that's just what I'm sharing now, because it leads into my transition out. So on this particular course, you're treated like basic recruits again. And I would say probably to a degree, probably more. Not more. No, when I was on basic, it was a lot more demeaning than I was on subject one. So yeah, before all this other stuff has happened these days. So yeah, but you're still treated like a basic recruit. You know, you've gone through, my mentality and rationale was, I've gone through all of this stuff, basic core training, selection cycle, committed to times, obeyed all those times, done all that stuff, proven that I can even still, when I used to consume alcohol, be hungover and still rock up to work and still perform well. Not that that's something that I'm encouraging or that we want people to be able to do, but that was the culture of the environment that I was in at that time. And that if you couldn't, you know, you got what was called dead ground cancelling, you got a bit of a tune-up behind closed doors, so to speak, to pull your head in and snap out of it. But those things in my head, I'm like, man, I've gone through this. I know I can do this. Why are you telling me that I have to be back in barracks by 8 o'clock in the evening if I want to go get something to eat off site, off camp, you know? I'm going to duck down to the shop. I'm going to grab me something to eat because I didn't get to the mess, or, you know, I just felt like something else. And then I'm going to be back, and don't worry, I'm going to be on parade for 5:30, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. No sweat. You don't need to worry. But to have all those little things then be thrown back in at least my face again, and don't get me wrong, I was on the course with other operators from the Australian SAS at the time. I felt, for me anyway, and this is just me speaking for myself, I felt that was really not only demoralizing but demeaning, undermining what I had gone through to get to where I was. Now again, rightly or wrongly, people would say, well, that's just, you know, the military, you know, that's the process, you know, you're going onto this course that you want to do. That's so, you know, you toe the line. But I never wanted to do the course in the first place, so I did everything to try to get out of it. I was like, no, I don't want to do it. Ultimately, what I was told is that I have to do it, and by my leaders, people that I respect, and, you know, they let me know, you know, we see you as this and this, and, you know, we see you as a future leader, blah blah blah, and that's nice, that's great. But my counter to that was, I don't need rank to be a leader. That was always my argument. As weak as that may be, that was always my argument. I don't need to have rank or stripes on my shoulders to be a leader. Well, at the end of the day, they've got more things on their shoulders than I had, and they said, you're going, so I had to go.
Yeah.
So I followed that. Still didn't want to be there. Made it pretty obvious in terms of my my body language and stuff when I was on certain parts, particularly the classroom stuff. And you know what, as I think about it now, it probably came across as arrogant and rude, and I can't change that. But that's just the frame of mind that I was in at that time. I just really did not want to be there. I wanted to be back at work and doing what, to me, my job was, which wasn't that. Anyway, there was a situation, fast forwarding, went out. I chose to go out. I was out with some of my friends. We were out beyond the curfew time to go get some. We were just cruising the mall, actually, and then got some stuff. And we weren't supposed to be out beyond this time. And I think it was on the weekend. We weren't supposed to be out beyond some. It was even more ridiculous. It might have been 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, evening. We were like, who dares wins? Like, let's go. we went out, and I'm not going to name the brothers. There were three of the other brothers that we're out with. Anyway, as we're walking around and we're getting ready to come back now, we've done what we wanted to do. We know it's after curfew. We're walking along and we see one of the instructors. Well, I didn't see the instructor until it was too late. Now, I don't know if the boys saw the instructor before, and I don't think they did. But we're walking sort of just in a gaggle. There's 4 of us, but there's heaps of people around. And I don't notice this instructor. He's not in uniform. He's just in civilians because it's a weekend. And he's walking towards us, and him and I lock eyes. So we lock eyes with each other. We see each other. Don't say anything. He doesn't say anything to me. Obvious that he's seen me, I've seen him. And then we just turn and carry on and walking off. And he walks off. And then I see the boys later. We're further up, and I'm like, bro, that was so-and-so. And they're like, yeah, we know. We just saw him. And I was like, oh, no.
or they were like, oh no, we're gonna, they would get in trouble. You're gonna have to end up serving some sort of punishment, etc. And as it turned out, he didn't see the others. And there's no way I was going to say that, what about them? They were with me. So there's no way that was going to happen. But he didn't see them. And he asked me the next day when we were at work and on parade, I got called out. Hey, so-and-so, were you at this place at this time, after this time, this day? Yes, staff. And he goes, was anybody else with you? No, staff. And then we just carried on like that and say, anyway, he goes, yeah, come see me after. Went to see him and then got a punishment for that. And it was easy. Like I just had to chuck my pack and stuff on and do extra drill out on the parade ground with some camp soldier barking commands and feeling good about themselves and making me run around the parade ground for the next 30 minutes or whatever. And that wasn't an issue. Like, that was easy. I'd been through more demoralizing stuff than having to put on a pack and run around a parade ground. So that didn't bother me. What bothered me was I felt like my how do I put this? I felt like what I've been able to do wasn't respected in the sense that, hey, I'm an adult. I've served operationally. I've done this and these things, and I'm going to continue to do it. You're wanting to call me out in front of everybody, treat me and make me feel like try to, make me feel like a child or whatever in front of this group of my peers that are on this course. Because when you're on that course, you're on with everybody from all the different parts of the Defence Force, not just the SF part, from infantry, from engineers, from armourers, from tankies, from admin, logistics, everywhere. And so I guess you'd say there's an element of feeling embarrassed by that, because, they make a bit of a spectacle out of it. Oh, I've caught this person, blah, blah, blah. As your punishment, you're going to get this and that. And I just thought, why did you need to do that? You don't need to do that. And I thought that was again, rightly or wrongly, I took it as a kick in the guts and a slap in the face. And I thought, you know what? Stuff you. I'm leaving. I'm heading back to Perth, back to where the real work is. And I told them that I was leaving, and they were like, oh no, you can't do that. And I was like, yes, I can. Just watch me. So I did, but prior to that, whilst I was still there, so I did the punishment, ran around the parade ground. They did their yip yarring, yelling, and I just followed those instructions, did that, and went back and said, yep, I'm heading back to Perth. And so they called my leaders back in Perth at the squadron that I was at, and they were telling me, you need to stay there, just stay there, don't worry about coming back. And I disobeyed them as well. I said, no, I'm coming back. I said, I'm not putting up with this. Like, by this stage, I was more comfortable in speaking up and speaking my mind. And I just vented and said, hey, I didn't come here. I didn't want to come here in the first place. I'd already let you know that I didn't want to come here. And actually, in that conversation, I reminded him, because I did. I said, well, if I'm not down with it, I'm just going to leave and come back. So I had already pre-warned my leaders that if this doesn't go well, if I'm not feeling it, I'm leaving and coming back. And I said, I already said I didn't come back. They're like, no, you can't. You need to stay there. I said, no. I said, listen, I'm not participating anymore. I'm coming back, or I'm just sitting here wasting time. So anyway, they got me on a flight, and I went back to Perth. My leaders weren't happy, obviously, but I was glad to be back. And I expected to, just get the crap jobs. Like, I didn't care. Like, keep me there, give me a crap job to do, but I'm still going to be doing my job. Like, I'm still going to be doing the work that I wanted to do, that I joined for. Anyway, it didn't really go like that. I ended up having conversations with my SSM, with my OC, the squadron commander, really good men. They tried to give me some counsel and spoke to me again about how they saw me as being somebody to be a leader. And they said, they did mention to me and said, how are you going to feel if somebody that joins after you is now going to be your patrol commander and is giving you instruction? I said, I don't care, as long as they're good at their job. I said, I'll do what they tell me to do. If they're good at their job and I'm still good at my job and good enough to be in that role, I'm going to do everything I can to support whoever my leader is, whether they join after me or not. And or, more importantly, the brothers that I'm there with, serving alongside. And at the end of the day, my patrol commander is just another one of the boys. And again, just using that term because it was just males at the time. They're just another one of the team.
So it did not matter to me at all. Those thoughts of rank and seniority and somebody joining after me and then all of a sudden being my patrol commander just never entered my head. Rightly or wrongly, that's just how I was wired. I did not care. If I'm doing the job, that's all that I'm cared about. And I guess they still couldn't relate or understand that, and they weren't happy with that. And I guess maybe their mindset is around, well, you know, how are you going to provide more value and benefit to your team? And again, I threw back at them as I don't need rank to be a leader. I can tell you now, I'll still lead in the areas that I can do, and I'll pick up and lead wherever I need to if the chips are down and that sort of stuff, because that's just what I'm going to do. That's what I've been taught. That's what I've seen. But it never got to that stage anyway. So I then ended up having to show cause. And what that means is I needed to show cause as to why I should still be within the unit, why I should still be an operator. So there were details sent to me, and again I was like, well, here it is, bang, and I started typing out, this is why I should be here, this and that, and I won't get into all the details, but it kept coming back to my statements and feelings around didn't need rank, didn't join to be a camp soldier. I'm here to do the job. I'm more than capable of doing the job. I don't care if I stay a trooper, which is the equivalent of a private for my entire career. Utilize me for as long as you can, for as long as I'm capable of doing this job, and you won't regret it, basically. Like, this is, utilize me for the job of what it entails. Well, anyway, my then troop sergeant came and grabbed me. Awesome, man. Like, the leaders were they were excellent. They were good men. They really tried to support me, and it must have felt like they were just beating their head against a brick wall when they were talking to me, because they were trying to guide me through. Then he come in and he had read it, and he's like, you can't submit this, because I had to send it to him first. You can't submit this. You're basically attacking the CO, the commanding officer of our unit. I said, well, he's the one that's asked me to show cause why I should be allowed to stay here and operate as an operator after having completed everything. And so it's like, yes, but you can't do that. You can't do it this way. I was like, ugh. So again, in my head, I'm thinking bureaucracy and politics of this isn't what I joined up for. And I really started to not enjoy it. I was like, this is not what I joined up for. Like, I want to do the job. You've invested this time, energy, and money into me and the other operators. Let me do my job. And so he tried to support more. He organised, I had to see a military psych. So and he brought the letter, and they brought in this lady, and I can't remember her name, but I got brought into the office. He was there, and she had already been given the letter that I had done, my response to showing cause why I should still stay there. And she had read it, and I don't even remember the questions, but I remember how I felt. And I felt, as I sat in there, being quite judged by her from my response, and I didn't understand why. And in my head, I'm thinking, who are you, lady? Like, you don't know me. Like, you've just been brought in for I don't know why, because people think that I'm going crazy. Maybe I was.
Because I don't want to do a course.
And maybe I was, because I think people could not fathom or understand, why would you just pull yourself off a course for something so trivial? And it was really trivial and insignificant. And all of that aside, so obviously it didn't change. I went back. I said, oh, well, if that's how it is, then, hey, I just sort of drew a line in the sand. I'll do the work if you want me to do the work, or if you don't, hey, then I'll leave. Now, they never said that I needed to leave, but it got to the point where they said, yeah, you're back on the next course. And I said, listen, I'm not doing that course. It serves no value or purpose to me. So I thought at that time. Hindsight, I think I could have got a lot out of it. But anyway, at that time, wasn't serving any purpose. I wasn't keen. And so when they threw that, and when they forced and said, you need to do this course, I was like, no, I don't. I'll just discharge. So I discharged. There's no reprimands or anything, nothing dishonourable. It was a voluntary discharge out of the unit, because I was just like, I did not see any value in that. Now, putting my older hat on and looking back at that was probably a dumb decision. It was probably dumb, just being quite frank and honest. A number of dumb decisions. Should have just stayed there on the course when my leaders kept trying to coax me to stay. should have just done the course again when they said, yeah, no, you've got to go do it. And shouldn't have left in sort of that fashion or that term or that situation the way that it was. Just because at that time I couldn't see what I was going to get out of it. I couldn't see the value it was going to add to my skill as a soldier, to my ability for even life after, which is where this question has come about as well. And as I think back on that, and as I know people that have gone through that training and those courses, it's been a real asset and a real tool for them. So in hindsight, well done to those that have finished that and gone and done that. The other 3 guys that I was on that course with, they completed it. They did well. They smashed it, which I knew they would anyway. I felt I would have smashed the course, but I wasn't in the right frame of mind to want to go there in the first place. I still wasn't in the right frame while I was there. Certainly wasn't in the right frame when I was challenged, and it seemed to be questioning my ability to serve as an operator. Like, are you blind? Can you not see? I've just gone through this stuff and I've already gone served an operation. I've already shown I can do this work. So again, selfishly and naively, let an opportunity go by. So that was the transition out. I told you it was going to be a long story. That's and again, that's the shortened version of that. How has it been post life? Well, I don't think I realized it wasn't as immediate and it wasn't as an emptier feeling when I got out initially, because I migrated straight into the private security sector. And without harping on too long, I was working with people that I'd either worked with or that I knew of from either New Zealand, SAS, Special Air Service, or the Australian one, and cross paths with other members from the battalion and stuff like that. Yeah. And so that's all right. You can go to the bathroom because the video's still got to go up, so we can have an empty chair.
Keep going, bro. Just keep going.
So, yeah, Brian's just heading off to the bathroom. What he doesn't realise is that we should put these videos up. So I've said, yeah, we need to put the videos up in these podcasts. So where was I? Yeah, the transition wasn't that bad because I was able to delve into that private security sector piece. Actually, you know what? I'm going to wait till he's back so he doesn't miss out. We're at 1 hour, 4 minutes so far on the second take, because the first recording stopped for whatever reason. So I'm going to wait till he's back, and then he's just going to have to edit this piece out. And if he doesn't, then it'll be a reflection of his interviewing skills. And I'm going to pull him up on that when he gets back, actually, about interviewing etiquette and protocol. The interviewer should never be leaving to go to the toilet while the person that's sharing their story is left to look at an empty chair and the wall that's behind him, or that would have been behind him. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that when he gets back, and yes, that will be his own fault. So Brian, when you come back, I'm going to remind you that when you organise an interview, that you should never, ever be the one to leave the person being interviewed by themselves. You should make sure that you are there the entire time, and that if you need to go to the bathroom and toilet, that you just hold it. You just need to. That's right. It's funny, isn't it, kids? You just hold it. And this is your Uncle Brian I'm speaking to. So, Uncle B, my brother-in-law, bro, next time you do an interview, don't ever write on a piece of paper again and hold up to the camera, keep talking, bro, I'm just going to the toilet, and then expect me to not call you out about it. So anyway, he's still not back. So now I'm wondering, is it a number 1 or is it a number 2? What do you think, kids? Is it a number 1 or number 2? Number 2. There you go, B. Your nieces and nephews feel, as do I, that you're potentially doing a number 2 right now. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes before you come back. Hey, there we go. He's back.
Back.
You know back. What? I think you need to listen to the pieces of time filler that I've filled in when you do the recording, because I'm going to share with you now what I have just
been sharing with our listeners. And I think it's probably worthwhile keeping it in there, actually. But this is what I shared. I said,
Okay.
I'm going to call Brian out on his interview etiquette. So next time, B, and what I've shared in there, next time you have an interview, you do not hold up or write on a piece of paper and hold up to the camera. Keep talking, bro. I'm just off to the bathroom. If anything, as the interviewer, you need to just hold it. You sit there, you hold it, and if you wet yourself, you wet yourself. So that's your nieces and nephews laughing and giggling over here, because that's the sort of stuff I was saying to the camera. And I said I was going to call you out about it. So I said, I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to just address this concern that I have with your interview etiquette. And then we'll come back to what I was sharing. But yeah, so that's the little spiel. I won't carry on anymore, but I talked a little bit about it in there and was having a good old laugh while you were not there, staring at your empty chair in the wall. But anyway,
Very good.
I was talking about then that transition and getting into the private security space. The connections were there. It felt different, but not overly different. And I was with people that I was used to working with. And to be fair, in an environment that I was used to working in. In an urban environment, it was still an operational approach. We're looking after high-profile personnel, or television media in this case, from all over the world, there to collect stories in the parts of the world that people wanted to hear stories about. So mostly in the Middle East and that sort of thing. And so during that was good. I did that for a few years. Once that had stopped, though, once we had done, sort of at that time where we wanted to be in our life, I was lost. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I was literally this close to going back to the unit, saying, hey, come back, listen, all right, I'll do that blinking stupid course if it comes again. I'll come back, okay? I've gained this other knowledge and experience and skill from different operational perspective, working again in a slightly environment without all the resources that a defence force might have. And I can bring that knowledge here and got some value that I could add. So in my head, I hadn't spoken with anybody in the unit, but that's what I was going through internally, because the job, and I don't think I've mentioned it here, but that job, for me at least, was the best job in the world. Like, nothing has come close to being in that environment or doing that sort of work for me personally. So nothing's come close to it. So I was prepared to suck it up and go back. Maybe I got a little bit wiser in those years. But I then bumped into a former Kiwi SAS guy. He was senior. He would have been an instructor, although he wasn't specifically an instructor on my cycle when I went through, but he was certainly already a badged operator in the unit. Dino is his nickname, as he would go by. And I bumped into him. He was in Perth. Our kids were at the same primary school at the time. He had a small business that he was doing, a car detailing business, plus doing some other stuff, and he was working in the sort of mining and oil and gas and training and assessing space. Anyway, we crossed paths, got to talking, and he was the one that sort of gave me my introduction and foot into this mining, oil and gas space from a training and assessing perspective. So I got into that, enjoyed it, but still not fulfilling. It's just a means to generate income and do what we needed to do from a financial perspective and all those sorts of things. So my time, as I think about it now, really took a whole bunch of different twists and turns. And what I mean by that, not all negative, like I would say for the most part, and in every instance, positives in every single piece of that. But I went from the military, working in that special forces world, to private security sector, multiple jobs all over the world, looking after mostly high profile television media, with the odd billionaire thrown in between, and cruising around on their private jet and stuff with them and their family and doing bits and pieces. So just some really valuable experiences, but again, were never as fulfilling as the level of what I experienced in the unit, as an example. So I got to do that, the private, the oil and gas, mining, health and safety, training and assessing, started a business in the health and fitness space, after this gym called Jim Jones. So there was an invitation only, and the reason that I share all of this,
So there was that part with the gym, which went well and is still going well. Oh, I've lost you on the video. Are you still there, B?
No, I'm still there.
That's better than at least you're still there.
Good.
So
Oh, look, I've lived this down.
you're not going to live it down. And if you are brave enough to leave what I was talking about in this edit, then audience and you will have a good laugh as we reflect.
I'm going to. It'll make my editing job a lot easier. Just leave it
correct.
in.
So that's what I think. I think you leave it in there because it'll be really valuable, I think.
And since you attended that course, bro, I will listen to this. You give me the
True story. Anyway, we got into the gym stuff. Got into community services work, working for a not-for-profit, one of the largest in the world. YMCA as the training manager for that. Got into computer coding. Did the full-time full-stack course. Got into, and before then, so this is not in the order of which it happened, but found mixed martial arts, found that I really loved it, enjoyed it, found it probably a bit later in years, and so the young guns coming through probably put into perspective relatively quickly that I probably shouldn't compete in it ongoing for a long period of time if I want to still have all my teeth and if I still want to be able to move reasonably well. So yeah, just a whole bunch of things that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of. I've worked in industries and fields that I've had no experience or qualifications or training in. It's all been on the hop, on the job, just having the mindset and approach of, I can do that. But along the way, so to a degree, a who dares wins mindset, which I had from 14 before getting to the unit, but which I also lost when I got out. I lost that. To a degree, I lost some of that belief in myself because I no longer felt as connected to the people in the places that I was working in, if that makes sense. Not as strong a connection anyway. And so I was going through life with all these different experiences, and albeit they've been wonderful and really helpful for me from a personal growth perspective, but it was always like I was trying to fill a gap. It was always like I had a big hole in my heart, in my mind, in my life that I was trying to fill. And not even my wife or children could fill it. You know what I mean? And that sounds terrible, but that's just where I was. That's how I'd felt for many, many years. And part of the reason why I could really relate to your conversation with Jared Tuoro, because I just connected to a lot of stuff that he was saying. And as I've gone through and unpacked a lot of that stuff prior to this interview and even prior to hearing your conversation with Jared, it's been really eye-opening for me, but it's also helped me to heal in a lot of respects in terms of understanding that was a part of my life, a very important and critical part of my life, a part of my life that I loved and still love today and cherish, but that doesn't define who I am now. It doesn't define what I could be going forward and who I could be going forward. And so learning to and having learnt to let go of that over the years has been really, really beneficial for me. And part of the reason why I wanted to create this series was to hopefully use it as a tool to open up not only myself but help other people that have got far more experience within these special forces units than I have, and far more different types of experiences in a number of different areas, not only from within the unit that they've served within, but also life after, and how they've been able to navigate, or potentially how they may still be struggling to navigate their life post that part of their life. Because I can tell you it's a difficult transition, at least for me anyway, to leave that type of environment and come into a much, much slower paced environment, being the real world or the civilian world. Like the dials and the cogs turn slow, and at least in my experience, and it's been difficult. It was difficult for me, and I think I found MMA as one opportunity to try to bridge some of that gap, because now I've got a similar type of camaraderie with the people that I'm training with day in, day out and competing against, and then to have that, not necessarily adrenaline, but to have that heightened sense of awareness trigger in again when I've when I'm in the cage, to then compete against somebody else who's looking to either knock me out or submit me, were little elements on a far lesser degree of what I experienced in my time in the Defence Force. And so, rightly or wrongly, I found myself searching for ways to try to fill that gap that I had in my heart and in my mind. And so, and it's, again, it sounds terrible to say that not even my family could fill that gap for me, but that's just where I was. Right now, though, where I'm at and what I've been fortunate enough to be able to do, so moving beyond that, man, I've been fortunate to, serve as a general manager for a training organisation. I've been fortunate to serve in senior management roles. I've been fortunate to have the time and attention, eyes and ears of CEOs and executive directors of organisations that are pretty large in nature, to have the time and attention, eyes and ears of people that are decision makers in pretty high profile, well-known companies. You've got your oil and gas companies like Santos, you've got ExxonMobil companies with those that work in that realm. You've got places where I've been fortunate enough to speak to and address people around leadership, culture, health and safety. And who would have thought a little Māori boy from Gisborne, growing up in Gisborne, didn't do that well in school, always took detention, whether it was lunchtime or after school detention, because he was too afraid and nervous to stand up and speak in front of an audience, could stand up and address really high-profiled people, could address large audiences by myself and do so with confidence, and have those memories or have those experiences build up to help me grow and develop into hopefully a better person than where I was yesterday, at the very least. And so, it's been exciting. It's been a long journey. It's still an ongoing journey, but I have the privilege now to serve as a services manager within a health and intellectual disability space, where I have absolutely zero qualifications or background in it. But my accumulation of skills and the transferable skills and the need to be able to connect and speak with people, the need to be organised, to be able to prioritise, to be able to plan, to be able to execute, all of those things, all of those and more. And there's just those transferable skills that I've been lucky enough to accumulate and acquire over the years. And I relate back to my time in the Defence Force, as well as post as well, learning from great leaders within the Defence Force, particularly within the SAS, and also learning from great leaders and examples outside who have never served in the Defence Force as a whole. You're one of those people. But having and seeing the examples of those people and hearing what they've been able to do, learning from them and applying those tools and stuff that I've been able to, as I've been able to open my mind and glean from those and apply them in my own situation, has been really, really powerful. And it's helped me realise that if I can do that, little hoary, little Māori boy, snot nose from Gisborne, could do that and can be where I'm at now, then it's possible for anybody to move beyond what their potential self-imposed limitations may be, or their self-imposed perception of who they think they are and where they think they are currently, and or where they think they could be. So yeah, it's been really enlightening, bro. It's been uplifting for me. You asked me a question, do I feel I've got my mojo back in our very first podcast interview? Yeah, 100%. Like, I was in a dark place for a number of other reasons than that as well, and we've spoke about that with regards to our oldest daughter. All of that's been buried now. Like, the weight of that has gone. My at the time was during all of that time, I was a strong, active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, willing to serve and do whatever needed to be done. That has gone because from the context of what I talked about in the previous podcast, but my time now revolves around largely making sure that I provide for my family, but making sure that I'm there for my wife and kids as well, that I'm supporting them in the things that they want to do. And my time when I was actively serving, I know was heavily pulled away because of the positions that I was in. Have I taken a lot of learnings from my time and service within the church? Absolutely, 100%. I would be lying and naive if I didn't say that the challenges and the uncomfortable situations that I was put in as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in particular leadership positions that I was lucky enough to hold, those things have been amazing experiences that have helped me to where I am, to get to where I am today. But yeah, I've turned from that, and I'm not a part of that. Do I do the things that I wasn't doing before? No, I'm still living the same life that I was doing when I was an active member. I'm just not an active participant. Like, I don't have my faith in a God, so to speak, or in Jesus Christ is not there. I don't have that. I don't have a sense that there's a higher being walking beside me, and rightly or wrongly, and whether that upsets or offends or hurts people's feelings, that's not the intent, but that's where I'm at now, and that's where I've been for a while. I don't have that sense of somebody's helping me or supporting me. I don't have that sense that I can lean on this spirit or this unseen thing that's going to help me through. For me, everything that I'm working on and striving to do now is through what I feel anyway, my efforts and hard work and persistence to just keep working at it, and the fact that my mindset has shifted to back to where it was before I even had this, before I was even introduced to the church, of what I knew I was going to do beforehand. I didn't know exactly how I was going to get there, but my mindset was already made up. And with this, with the podcast, with the future intent, with work, with employment, with the goals that I've set for myself going forward, all of that, I'm just wired. The wiring is the same as what it was back when I was 14, if that makes sense. It's not dependent on it's not dependent on a higher being or a higher power to help me get there. And if I fail and if I don't get there, it's because I failed and I didn't get there. It's not because the spirit or whatever didn't help me achieve it, or that there was something else to learn and that sort of stuff. Yeah, there's things for me to learn, and there's always going to be those, and I'm not always going to get what I want. But yeah, that's, I guess, just a bit more explanation, because when we did the first interview, had quite a number of members, family and friends, or I consider extended family and friends, reach out and talk about it, and just, in their own way, look to support Awhi and support and encourage me and uplift me. And it did 100%. But yeah, being, as to your question, is anything out of bounds? Nothing's out of bounds. To be open and transparent of where I'm at, this is who I am now, and I'm comfortable and happy and content in that. Is my wife and the children 100% happy? Probably you'd have to ask her, but I know she would prefer me to be back where I was with them, but I'm not, and she accepts and respects that, and I love and respect her and accept that she continues in her faith, and the kids do as well. So that's a bit of a tangent, from thing, but it's an important part of what's helped me get to where I am, and part of my transition out of the Defence Force and where I'm currently at this stage. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, I like that because that's raw, and that's absolutely probably part of the journey that we can't gloss over. We can't put a ribbon on it and say, oh, no, everything was pretty. I left the Defence Force and everything went roses. No, it's a journey. It's a transition. We all go through things. I guess as we look to wrap this up, Joe, and I'm really grateful for this time. It has been enlightening. It has been really raw. I think part of it, as I hear that, I can almost feel your drive. If that makes sense, just the way you describe it. You're such a driven person, but at the same time, it's all about love and helping others. It's come through really clear. How do I serve others? And hence why the name of the series, right? Now, in the service of others, who dares wins. You have both those mindsets, but they're not competing mindsets. They're complementary mindsets. Who dares wins is not for me. It's who dares wins is for helping others. And that's what I've heard. So I really appreciate that. I'm really appreciating the fact that that you've shared some real nuggets for people.
Hopefully. Hopefully some nuggets.
Oh, you have, bro. Nuggets, and I will keep in the our moments
hopefully,
that
hopefully
I have.
They're gold nuggets and not turd nuggets.
The gold nuggets, or chicken nuggets.
Chicken nuggets. Yeah. Some chicken nuggets.
I think the thing that really stands out for me, though, as I reflect on the last few moments that we've had together in this conversation, is the endless hill. The journey of the endless hill is just, it's there, but how badly do you want it? How badly do you want to get there? And I think that's just been amazing. As an aside, but as related to this, going through this time in this journey, my kids have always looked up to you in terms of, wow, his Uncle Joe does this.
That's because I have chocolate. That's because I give them chocolate.
And because you have chocolate, you are Uncle Chocolate.
That's right.
You are known as Uncle Chocolate. Always at the chocolate. And then, but then, as they've gotten older, now they can see, and I think they can appreciate more, what that journey has looked like. And of course, they still there's no chocolate. Change. You're still Uncle Chocolate. They still want chocolate.
They still want, hey, Uncle, where's the chocolate? No.
All right. So one last question then to wrap this up, and it goes along the similar theme of what we have with the podcast, Creating a Better Future, would be, this question is, what would be your main piece of advice, the biggest piece of advice that you could give somebody that is thinking of starting a journey that has been similar to yours, that have wanted to go off and say a special forces route or something similar, maybe perhaps professional athlete or something along those lines?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure about the professional athlete piece, but I get what you're saying, and being able to, in comparison to, or linking, not comparison, but the similarities of that process. What would be a piece of advice? For me, if I think of have my 14-year-old hat back on, or brain back on, maybe it's still at the 14-year-old brain actually. It was really simple. It was really clear. I just saw what I wanted to do, and I then just focused my time and attention on trying to do it. But coupled with that, I would say, because this particular experience, from my point of view, is a very specific, and it's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Elite is the right word. It's a very specific, and it's a very elite objective, drive, goal, whatever you want to call it. And before I went to do it, the initial thoughts aside of this looks cool, the very next thought was, or not thought, but the very next piece was that I knew that I would make it. I knew that I'd get there. And so I guess if I was trying to provide that in an advice context, is pass on to those that might be listening to this, or that might have similar drive or aspirations to want to do things. Be clear and be certain that that you're going to do it, but probably more importantly, that you know that you want to do it. So be very clear. It's simple. If you want to do something, if if that drive is there, be very clear in knowing that you want to do it, or knowing that you're going to do it, but be more clear around knowing that you actually do want to do that thing, whether that's to be an All Black, whether that's to be in the SAS, whether that's to be whatever, the CEO of a company, whether that's to start this particular business, whether that's to start this podcast. Be clear and sure, like you and I have been, we know that this is what we want to do, because we want to help create a better future. And we don't necessarily know exactly how we're going to get there, but we know that we want to do it, and we know that it's going to happen, and it has happened. So a couple other thoughts that I have that I just want to add to this, Brian, that
absolutely,
as we've spoken, it's been great. I've really enjoyed it as well, and I appreciate you for allowing me to waffle on for long time. Thank you for that, for one. But also, it's helped me realize, and I touched on this with you before you hit the record button, that it would be really, really helpful, I think, to get our wahine tours perspective, the strong women, the warrior women that have supported their husbands or their spouses, partners, boyfriends, whatever you want to call it, that have served in this type of environment. And they've been the ones that have normally been at home, that have borne the brunt of potentially PTSD or post-traumatic stress, potentially borne the brunt of, silence, of the spouse not wanting to talk about stuff, borne the brunt of having to nurture the children, maintain the home, look after the bills, make sure the house is in order, make sure that the routine is in place even when the husband comes back, bending to and submitting to when the husband comes back, because
trying to walk carefully, for want of a better term, on eggshells when the husband gets back from a fairly high-stressed environment, those sorts of things. And I just thought, man, it would be powerful to have their perspective.
Absolutely.
And I think it would be only right to invite those wives that would be willing to share their stories with us, or maybe we need to have a female interviewer. So maybe there's a wife or somebody out there that might be able to connect or resonate, that's been through that might be open to trying to draw out their stories, because these wives might be more comfortable speaking to a woman that can relate on more levels than what we can, or than what you and I could. So that's just, one element that I've felt would be worth exploring and adding to this podcast, because I would love to hear their experiences. And as I've thought about that, even with my own situation and my wife, there are a lot of things that I've thought about now that I just never thought about while I was operating, and I've never thought about till just recently. And that makes me feel somewhat disappointed in myself as well. Makes me mindful of and regret not thinking of those things. Just, again, that it's quite a selfish role, and why I've felt and mentioned that it's it should be, or it's more of a single person's lifestyle and life if you can manage it. But when you find the right person that you're willing to give your heart to and that you love, or then that stuff sort of goes out the window and you try to make it work. And thank you again, Brian. Appreciate your time, brother. For our listeners out there, and particularly those brethren who have served but have been reluctant to get back to me. There's only been a handful yet. They have replied, said, "Oh, hey, I'll check it later," but it's been probably well over a week now. Haven't heard back from you. Yeah,
so come on now.
But this is the intent. The intent isn't to be judgmental. The intent isn't to point a finger or to criticise. The intent isn't to make any of those that have served in this environment feel embarrassed or ashamed about what they've done. Am I proud of some of the stuff that I've done? Yes. Am I not so proud of things that I've done and been involved in? Absolutely yes as well. I'm not. But through being able to speak about these things, and me fortunate to have somebody like you, B, that I can lean on, that I can trust, a man of great integrity and humility. You've been able to help me through a number of things, even just through text messages that you've sent in the past through difficult times, and having you around and having you as part of this, having you as the co-founder, has been a beautiful experience. So I appreciate you and thank you for that. And hopefully our listeners, and those particularly those former operators, just at this time, will hopefully connect and resonate to this. And one last part, which we didn't mention, or I think I've mentioned it on the announcement of this, but we'll probably have to put up both of these, I reckon, probably either this weekend or next week. The podcast, this in the service of others, who dares wins. We're just sort of at this stage identifying and targeting New Zealand or former New Zealand SAS operators, or current serving if we're lucky enough to get any of those, but with every intention of expanding out. So it won't just be staying, it's not exclusively New Zealand SAS operators or SF operators, but it will expand out to the other ex-Special Forces operators that are around the world. And there's many, and there's wonderful people and great experiences, and we want to tap into that. So for now, though, we just felt the appropriate place and a good place to start would be here in Aotearoa, and looking forward to reconnecting with some of the guys that I haven't spoken to or spoken with or caught up with in a long time. So that's just a bit of an explanation around that and where we're at this stage. So again, thank you, B. Thank you to our audience for listening, and that's all I have to say at this time, unless you got any other questions for me, B.
No more questions, Joe. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you being absolutely candid and raw. So for those listening to this podcast, we appreciate your time and know that you've got a lot out of it. Normally at the end of our podcast, we would say, let's go. But I think with respect to the content and the things that express respectfully, I will say, who dares wins. Thank you, Aotearoa.
Thank you, B.